Like, really look in the mirror and know who you are and stop lying to yourself that you're special and that you're a genius, because you're probably not. And there are many people who are smarter than you. I think self-awareness is the most important trait you could possibly have. It's like, just be honest and humble and real. I think the people who thrive are the ones who are self-aware.
If you had to distill down just one piece of advice, what would that be?
I mean, I think
Hello, I'm Dr. Becky Sage, co-host of Founded and Grounded, and I'm here today with Ollie to discuss episode 5 of season 6. Hi Ollie, how are you today?
I'm doing really well, thank you. And you?
Yeah, good. We kind of had a little bit of a break since we last recorded, so I feel like I'm kind of getting myself going again, warming up back into the next episode.
There's going to be some good outtakes today, I think.
Yeah, keep an eye on all the socials. You'll find some of those outtakes, I'm sure. So, who is this week's entrepreneur?
So we had a bit of a change to the schedule. So we were going to have Hannah from Hyber. There was a few problems with logistics. So basically now she's coming in episode 7. So for episode 5, we have got an amazing guest. We have got the co-founder of Arcade Media, Jordan Schwarzenberger, and he is the manager of a small YouTube collective called the Sidemen.
Now I have to confess, I did not know who the Sidemen were before I did this episode. I do now. I understand that they're a pretty big deal, and I've been asking other people, and they're like, yeah, we know who the Sidemen are. So, despite the fact I do spend a lot of time on YouTube, I did not know. So this episode was really fascinating to me, and I think it's partly because I've been thinking a lot about some of the themes that are in here. So things like personal branding, building audiences, how the creator economy is evolving and how we build businesses off the back of that. So Jordan's leveraged all of these things in Arcade Media, but also in his other roles to date. So I'm really excited to listen in on his insights.
Yeah, this is like basically the 101 playbook for everything you just mentioned.
Yeah, so let's have a listen.
Jordan, good afternoon. How are you doing?
I'm very well, thank you, mate. How are you?
Very well. Thank you so much for making time to come on Founded and Grounded. Before we dive in, I just want to check your name. Yeah. Schwarzenberger.
That's it. Well
Fantastic.
Done.
And it's German origin, is that right?
German, yeah. It's the only German thing about me. Don't ask me to speak German or anything because I am totally useless at anything German. So I'm a quarter German on my dad's side. My dad's half. I'm quarter, so it's just crept in, and the name just flew in fully. Awesome. Very German of the name to do that, actually.
And does it mean Black Mountain?
Yeah, it does. It does. Man of the Black Mountain, I think, something like that.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Good stuff. So firstly, Jordan, I wanted to know a bit more about how your upbringing led you to the world of media and creative strategy.
Yeah, so I guess I can go back to my time at school. I think these things start a lot earlier than people think, in terms of obviously interest and being able to experiment. And I think also the more you can do at school, the more you can accelerate your creative, expression, or you trying different things, the further you go. That's another maybe tangential point for later. But yeah, I think when I was at school, secondary school specifically, I just started to dive more and more into creative things. I'd always, even when I was at primary school, I did little side projects here and there. Like I set up the newspaper at my school called the Froggy Times, just by going around to local shops and asking for donations for paper from, printers and whatever else, and, coordinated a team of writers to do an issue. We did 2 or 3 or something when I was in year 6. I did other things like when I was in primary school, did like mixtapes randomly and made like CD. All of those kind of things started in primary school, then into secondary school, carried that on into various creative projects, things like making an album of music when I was like 14. I did a clothing company called Black Mountain when I was going into 6th form, had a film magazine called Lost VHS when I was like 15, 16. And that was, we got to go to screenings and do all sorts of stuff. So I'd always done, I guess, projects which were creative in nature. And then as social media became a thing in 2007, 8, really, like it kind of properly boomed up when everyone got iPhones. And when, I was probably the first generation of kids when I was in year 7 in 2008. I think. So we were the first generation to have to deal with, Facebook's becoming a thing and all this stuff. And how do parents deal with that? And some people have iPhones, some people don't. And some people still have their Nokia bricks, some people have BlackBerry. So it was this whole weird kind of world, which was the first of its kind, really, right? And so with that came obviously the opportunity to connect with friends online and to share things. And then when you're creative and you're building things, and you can distribute yourself, right, through your Facebook page. So I did a lot of that, and actually with all my projects, learned how to create and then distribute onto social, right? That was like in year 7, 8, and then all the way up through to sixth form. So that was always embedded during my time at school. And I love my school for being able to help me and allow me to do all of that stuff. And then, fast forward, I guess, into my time after school, I'd already had a lot of the, the raw skills of being able to conceptualize things, activate things, and then leverage social to amplify things. And then that sort of set me up, I think, for everything today.
Awesome. So you've clearly got some entrepreneurial traits within you from a young age, which have now flourished. How do you go from that kind of like conceptual thing in your head to making it a reality?
I think when I was, especially during school, but then, even obviously up until now, I think it's about having I don't want to say like fearlessness, it sounds really wanky, but having the sense of like, why not? Just with everything, you might as well give it a go. And I think as time's gone on, I've become increasingly aware as to how many things can get in the way of an idea becoming real, that you might as well just start and see how far you get, because there might be many things, whether it's cost or whether it's people or whether it's prioritization, whatever, stopping an idea from happening. So rather than getting too wedded to each individual idea, I think it's better just to try lots of different things, see what sticks, see what works, see what you love, and then take it from there. And I think we've carried that mindset all the way into what we're doing with the Sidemen now. I think a lot of what we do now is based around experimentation, trying, failing, just giving it a go, because you might as well, especially when we're not talking about building products that take years to create. We're not talking about heavy amounts of investment. We're talking about an idea, a phone or a camera, and then being able to activate and shoot and put something online. And that goes through all of the things that we do and all the things that I've done. I think in my career has been driven by that sense of, don't say fearlessness because it's a very wanky word, but that sense of fearlessness, I'll say fearlessness, just not caring really about the outcome. Just give it a go. Why not?
But I think you're right. It is fearlessness, because a lot of people have an idea in their head and they manifest it and they talk about it maybe, but they never act on it. And I think there's something holding them back usually, which is often fear, or what will other people think. So for people listening maybe who want to take something forward, what practical advice would you give them on being able to do that?
Yeah, I mean, I think practically it's just about, I think finding great people who are better than you at things is really important. Something that to this day, like I would never say that I'm an expert in anything really that I do. I just have, I've got a great network of people around me who you can call upon to do things far better than you could. So, good example, I have an amazing designer friend of mine who's literally about to give birth. I don't know if she's giving birth, she's about to give birth. She's in Australia and she worked with me at YMU. And to this day, we've worked with each other now for 7 years. And she's the only person I call, like immediately if I have a design thing, I'll just send it to her every single time. And there's people like Brad, who does all of our websites, all of our UX and UI. Again, first person you call to when so you have people around you who can execute, who are technically gifted. For me, it's about creatively coming up with a concept, having a vision on what I think would be great, and then finding great executors to go and do it is I think the real skill. And I think as I've gotten older, I've learned that that's really where the value comes from a corporate perspective, is being able to coordinate others rather than do it yourself. And if you're doing it yourself, you're not doing the job, is weirdly the switch that happens. I think the more senior you go in companies as well, you realize actually, I'm not supposed to be making the decks. I'm supposed to be getting people to make the decks. And the skill is finding the people and helping them to make it, which is a total switch. But I think, it's a helpful attitude to have, where you become a coordinator and you creatively have a vision and you find people better than you to execute.
And you're only 26, Jordan. You've achieved a lot in your
27
career.
actually.
27 now.
That was my birthday. 29th of June, 2 weeks ago, whatever.
Happy birthday for
Thank
that. Sorry for the incorrect date of that.
Not at all.
So in terms of obviously your career today, we're going to come on to Arcade Media shortly. But can you just give us a quick kind of whistle-stop tour of, kind of your early career?
Totally. So my early career started out off the back of school, really. I had this instinct that I didn't want to go to university. I had a friend of mine who'd done work experience at the one company that I could think of that I saw as cool and relevant and interesting, which was Vice. In 2014, this would have been. So I asked him, please, can you send me all the emails that you have and I'll message everybody. So I did, and I messaged everybody in the company. Well, it was like 20 people, wasn't everyone in the company, but 20 emails that he had. And I said, hey, this is me. I've been doing all these creative projects at school. I think you guys are great and I love what you do and I'd love to come and speak to somebody. Would anybody be able to talk to me for 50 minutes? And it worked. And of 20 people, I think 2 replied and met one. She then introduced me to the head of the agency as I started to talk about my sort of creative aspirations. And I didn't realize that the word creative in a business sense means creative commercial rather than, just come up with ideas. It's creative commercial and branded content and brand activations. And so I didn't even know what that was at the time. So then I met the head of the agency, Ian, who's a friend of mine still to this day. And he was like, yeah, come in for work experience if you want. And I was like, great. So I did. Worked over the summer. So I did 6 weeks. Advice, getting paid £50 a week or whatever in travel and food expenses, which was, again, thankfully I had somewhere to go home to in London, right? Like that's a real privilege in and of itself. But still, I could live off £50 a week expenses at 17 or 18 or whatever I was. That's right, actually, I was 18 because I met him the week before my 18th birthday, and then I went to Glastonbury that weekend for the first time, and then came back and then went into this. It was a pretty intense summer. But yeah, and then I loved it, and I actually found that during that summer, I learned way more in those 6 weeks than I could ever. It was worth more than 10 degrees that I was going off to study after that, a degree called digital culture, and I learned more in those 6 weeks looking back than I did in the entire time I was there, but also I think in the entire time times 10. Like, it was so valuable just being in and around this incredible business when Vice, rest in peace today, but when Vice was thriving and in its real peak, I think. So yeah, that was amazing. And then I left there, started uni at King studying a degree called digital culture, which is a big red flag in itself because what does that even mean? The most intangible, silly degree that I could ever have picked, which is why I picked it, because I was like, I really don't want to do something that I really know is going to be a waste of time, like English lit or, I don't know, not drama, not that I would have done drama, but something which is so traditional and classical, but so far away from what I wanted to do, which was creative, digital, social. So that's why I picked it. But anyway, then, yeah, went, hated it, thought it was just the worst thing in the world, like such a waste of time. And then I was at Vice every Friday during that time. So I'd do uni on Monday to Thursday, despise it, go to Vice on the Friday, love it. And it was this thing of, okay, this is where I'm meant to be. This is terrible. This is great. I need to just somehow get out and go there. Even though that was just a seed at the time, that then, I guess, came together at the Christmas party when everyone was a little bit drunk, and I was stood there next to the creative director and the associate creative director, who were my kind of 2 lines up, right? Mm-hmm. And I was just talking to them like, oh yeah, like uni sucks, that's terrible. And they were like, look, we'd love to hire you. We'd be more than happy to take you on. We don't want to obviously annoy your parents. I remember it distinctly. We don't want to annoy your parents because, have them coming for us that we've kind of got you out of uni. But if you want to come and join us, we'd love to have you. So I was like, yes, 1,000 times yes. Went home. Spoke to my parents. Oh yeah, cool, go for it. And they were always incredibly supportive. And then once they said yeah, I just dropped out. I was like, that's it, bye. Didn't come back after Christmas. Started Advice Jan 1st, I think, or whatever it was, in the new year. And then I was there for 3 more months before Ian, who ran the agency, the first person I met, said to me, oh, I've got this opportunity to go to Lab Bible to set up their agency. He took me for like a sneaky coffee around the corner. And I was like, this is weird. He's like, yeah, so I've been offered this opportunity to go and build the agency over at Lab Bible. Do you want to come with me? And I thought for half a second, I was like, yeah, why not? I'm 18, like, this is great. I know Lab Bible, big, again, not at its peak, but definitely on its ascendancy at the time, coming out of its FHM 2.0 Bum Day Mondays phase, whatever, and going more into its adult business phase. Super exciting, like, why not? So I went with him and loved it and was there for 1.5 years. Did so many great things. Won Lad of the Year, Employee of the Year, my first year. Thank you very much. I have that. I don't have the trophy. They didn't give it. I don't think they wanted to spend money on an actual trophy, but that was a good accolade nonetheless. Met loads of amazing people. Was in like the dream team of Lab Bible. It was the best group of people you could ever imagine, all going off and doing brilliant things themselves now. And I loved it. And then I got to the kind of end of that time and I was like, oh, you know what? I've been working with a bunch of brands, loving life. Let me start my own agency. And because, again, why not? If there's 2 words, it's why not? Like, why not? I had enough experience, I thought. So I did start my own agency called Roundabout, left Lab Bible and started that off. And I did that for 6 months. Whole aim of that business was to help brands connect with Gen Z and to reach this audience, which I knew because I was their audience, I could credibly speak to. So I did that for 6 months, loved it, worked with a number of different companies, MTV, Boiler Room, a bunch of places. And then one of the clients was James Grant, which very old school traditional talent agency. And we were working with them on future-proofing for some of their clients. Got on amazingly well with Mary, who was the MD at the time. She's now the CEO. We loved working with each other. And she was there one day with me saying, oh, like, look, if you wanted to, we'd love to have you as much time as you could give. And we'd love to hire you. But like, I've only got your business. What do you want to do? So I said, look, I'd love to do it. Like, why not? Again, why not? Like, I can come in, basically be responsible for all of the future-proofing creative strategy of the business. Yes, it means leaving my company, but my company was a bridge, right? It was a vehicle to get more experience, really. And so I said, yeah. So I came 2018, beginning of that year. I joined as the chief creative officer of YMU at like 20. So that was a whole nother thing because I'm coming into a big corporate beast and I'm 20 years old, sort of throwing bombs here and there, trying to not make enemies, which is easy to do when you're 20. And now I know. Now I'm in my old age, 27, I look back and go, imagine a 20-year-old coming in and telling me what to, I would just be raging. But everyone was so nice. And thankfully, I definitely had wobbles with that where like, I don't know how do you assert yourself? How do you like live your role in a company that's big and traditional and has tons of people who are older than you? How do you do that? That was a real challenge, but managed to navigate it and got there in the end for sure.
Do you think there was an element of naivety there in terms of and fearlessness?
I think a bit of imposter. I think it's imposter syndrome thing of how on earth do you justify you're on like a 6-figure salary, you're 20 years old, you've just come out of your business, which was like doing well, but you've just kind of left that to go and do this. Like who are you to do this? Like, do you know what I mean? And I never had that sense of I can't do it. It was just how do I do this? Like, what is the political and dynamic navigation within this company that I need to now do? Because it's very weird going in so young. And it is when you're in a senior role and people have, and to be fair, like people are so good. And looking back, they were the most patient, kind people, everyone. Because now I'm like, would I have been? Probably not. But anyway, yeah, I loved it. I was there then for 4 years pretty much. And then COVID happened. YMU hit a few bumps with that where like a lot of the revenue from live and shows, everything just got stripped away. So the company, I think, became, I'd say, just stressed and everyone was trying to work for the sake of working. And obviously, the closer you are at the top of a business like that during bad times, the closer you are to the stress because that's where it all accumulates, right? It goes up the chain. So you're in those rooms, you're in those board meetings, you're working and you become almost a tool of, clients. We're doing something. Look, we can put this together. You want to do this virtual show? Okay, cool. Well, I can do it for you. Or I can help, like whatever it was. And actually that became, I found quite draining in terms of time, but also just a waste of time because you were working on things that you knew weren't really great, but you had to. And that's being an employee, right? Great for some people, but it wasn't really for me. And I just planted the seed that actually I wanted to go and do something for myself. Or if the opportunity, not even that so much, but more if an opportunity came up, then I would do it. So ended up, this is a bit of a long story, but ended up through a friend of mine, Aaron, who was at YMU. He went off to manage some TikTokers. He met a guy called Sam, who's our third co-founder now in Arcade. Sam's been the accountant for most of UK YouTube for the last decade. He came together with Aaron. Aaron brought me in. We all came together as a three and said, look, let's have a conversation with the Sidemen to see what they can do more of, because Sam had seen that they were doing like this and they could be doing that. So we did. And all the stuff I've been doing at YMU around strategy and career planning, everything, all of that came into this strategy deck proposal, which they'd never had before. No one ever made them like a deck or like a strategy of like, you're here, you want to get here, here's how you can do it. And they were like, yeah, cool. So that was in maybe March 2021. And fast forward, we started on April 1st and fast forward 4 years, this is our 4th year now. And yeah, we're here today. So yeah, been a lot of fun.
What a journey. And in a nutshell, what does Arcade Media do?
So Arcade is principally it's a management and ventures company that manages one client, which is the Sidemen. So in our management capacity, it's very focused, which is why it's been, I think, successful in terms of still going, still building, having things that have come off well, having clients, Sidemen who are happy still in what they do and not drained by working with us. All those things are sort of softer things of management that are, I think, can make or break these relationships. And it's more intensive, right? Because it's just them and just us. But it works really well because of that. It means that there's a lot of trust. There's a lot of openness. Sam's also has been their accountant and essentially their CFO for the last 10 years. So he has a deep understanding of their business. He can pay invoices and all these things which speed things up along the train. And I think, again, it's having that really immersed management experience, both sides, makes everything so much better. You can really build together, I think, and build meaningful things. And it was a big problem at YMU, I found. And at most management companies, when they have scaled rosters, hundreds of clients, how do you ever do anything meaningful? And you can't really, because you're just busy jumping onto idea after idea after idea rather than execution. So management companies struggle with a lack of execution, which is why they revert back into the things they can do quite easily, which is brand deals, just servicing brand deals, which you can't do in America. So managers don't do that really in America in the same way that they do here. There's more of a legal line. There's regulations around what a manager can be over there and an agent. Here, it's all blurred. So managers chase money and chase brand deals, which makes sense. It's cash flow, it's transactional. But what that does mean is you do that at the behest of building anything long term, which is why I think our space in this country is not as far ahead in terms of entrepreneurial attempts, if you will, because these things, you got to try again. Why not? But there's a lack, I think, of entrepreneurial, I guess, ambition in our space here because people are more, just generally as an industry in talent, not just creators, but in talent generally, because people are just driven by brand deals and basically revenue from third parties rather than building. So you become an agent, really. We have an industry of agents more than we have an industry of managers. And that's fine for agents who want to just do that. But I think it means that there are massive opportunities here in a way that I think there are in America, of course, but there's more people trying bigger things over there. Naturally, that's the culture. So
would you say it's the difference then sort of between short-term versus long-term thinking?
Totally. And money, right? So you don't make money from the brands until they materialize. So that might be to be honest, these days, it's a 10-year journey, really. I think we've gone past the quick boom phases of business. And also if you look at what happened during COVID, pre-COVID, and also 2021, you had these cycles of big lifts of companies being able to sky huge valuations, and then you can sell pretty quickly. Right? There's a lot of cash flowing around. There's a lot of optimism, but obviously in a market which we're in today, high recession market, high inflation market, things take a lot more time. Right? It's the worst. We raised a fund called Upside, which is our first pre-seed and seed fund, $10 million. In our first close, we're looking to close at 25 in October, and the Jamie and Sam who led that, I've never seen a fund. I mean, as everyone says, the hardest funding environment in ever to ever work in, ever raise money in. And they've been successful doing it in the end, but it took a long time to raise 10 million. It's not a massive fund, but it's a hugely negative market because obviously everyone's dealing with inflation, dealing with the recession and everything that's been going on over the last year and a half or so. So it does mean that building businesses takes longer, but if you can sustain it and build it for the long term, then I think you can really win. And that's what we're looking forward to. It's actually the 10-year journey is what I see. And the businesses that are flying today, you look back, a lot of them have been going for 8-9 years. It's one thing I've just really noticed of late. It's actually, the big winners have stuck it out. All the people who are like, have they built this incredible, whatever, pick a brand, Gymshark, pick a brand that's flying today. It's like they've been building for 10 years, and you're looking at it on year 8, year 9. So it's again, self-awareness, humility, stick it out for that level of time. If you can get to that level, you'll probably be all right.
I love it, Jordan. You started your own company and then obviously just gone after the biggest acts available, possible, and you've signed them. What was your plan B if you didn't sign the Sidemen?
Wouldn't have left YMU.
Okay.
Well, maybe. But I think it was really all hinged on that conversation. Okay. It was that I didn't want to start a management company. I don't like management. Sidemen are an exception because we're not really managing them. But we're building. We're business partners, really. So it's a different relationship. But I really have no interest in managing talent. I think in the UK especially, the money is so low for talent management. It's not an interesting business model. It's actually a terrible business model. Taking commission, 15% typically, for a talent pool that is increasingly devalued because of things like TikTok, increasing the amount of creators, the amount of talent out there. It means that yes, you can make decent money if you really want to be any volume. The volume transactional game is not one that I have been interested in thus far. Increasingly, I think there's opportunity for that, maybe in various capacities, but I don't think it's like the business that I'm dying to build or dying to have. I'm much more focused, I think, and I think me, Aaron, and Sam have all been aligned on that, and Victor as well. We've all been aligned on this idea of building for the long term and really helping them who built this incredible brand maximize it. That's what I love, the kind of IP. You could call it IP exploitation or IP development. How do you take a brand and really scale it, both in terms of perception and in terms of execution? Because those are two different sides as well that I'm super aware of. And I think a lot of that came from my time at YMU, maybe around PR and the perception in the industry and value to brands and all these things. It takes time to kind of build that. It's not like you just go into brands and you're worth X amount, or go into partners and you're worth X amount. It's actually how do you build the perception through telling the story and bringing people. And that's been really my job, I think. If there's one thing that I've led on it's one thing that, and I've loved leading on really is being the ambassador, if you will, for them. So I kind of shine the light. I'm like, look over here, like look at what they've done and look at what we're doing together and what does this represent at a bigger level. And you beat the drum of that story over 2-3 years. I think you get amazing opportunities come to you. And I think increasingly over time now, you're seeing the fruits of that. Like we're getting amazing opportunities and people coming in and saying, we're watching what we're doing, or the Netflix doc, those sort of things. You see these, these great moments come together now. And a lot of that is because we've been beating this drum and we've been trying to change industry perception as well as execute. And those are two wings of a plane, if you will, I think, in this space. And a lot of people neglect one more than the other, I found, from traditional management.
Are people taking note of what you're doing in terms of the model and sort of trying to replicate it?
I think maybe. I think. Look, a lot of nice people come and say, "Yeah, you guys are doing really well, and you're kind of the case study for how to do this and stuff," which is really sweet, and get that quite a lot. However, I don't think there's not another Sidemen, right? So that's the one challenge is, and this is why I wouldn't want to manage. I think I'm more interested in seeing what opportunities are out there to build rather than, having, again, a pool of talent that you exclusively represent and you're stuck to that talent. I don't think that's interesting anymore because, again, the Sidemen are able to do what they do at the highest level because they, at the time, had, I think, 8 million subs, built an incredible audience, huge amounts of connection, and a great theme of friendship and community, etc., that allowed all these other things to come off. But who else is there? It was a conversation we had right at the beginning. Who else would you really want to manage? So I think, yes, probably, maybe people are looking and going, oh, like you've been able to successfully launch like restaurants and breakfast, all the different things we've done. But at the same time, for most people out there, they could not do it because, not because of us, but because of the Sidemen, obviously, like they're one of one. So I think it's I would say the Sidemen are akin and our operation is akin to Mr. Beast for Europe. It's like, that's the only equivalent I can say to people and it makes sense. It's like what Mr. Beast is doing over there, most people can't do. What the Sidemen are doing over here, most people can't do. And that's because of Mr. Beast's Jimmy's audience and his infrastructure that has been built on a long time of building out cash reserves and team members and management structures, etc. Same for the Sidemen. They've got cash, they've got teams, they've got all these things which allow for so much more experimentation and entrepreneurial attempts than most could do, purely because you're trying to go video to video, hand to mouth in a way from most creators, especially now when everything is down per head for creators. Most people do not make a lot of money. Some do, but very few. And really they have other business models around them, I found. But even then, it's like, it's not easy. Even the people you think are big and making loads of money in the space, they're probably not. I think the ones that do well are when they're using their social as a tool for a business. And then the business makes money, not the social and the content itself.
I think you're doing yourself a bit of a disservice there, Jordan, in terms of like, obviously the Sidemen are absolutely massive, but as you say, you've taken them from 8 million subscribers up to, what are they now?
22, nearly.
Yeah, 22, and obviously launched all these new brands alongside it. What do you think, where do you think they would be if you didn't sign them?
That's a good question. I mean, look, I'm not sure. I think they'd probably be the first to say that they needed a team. So whether or not they would have found another team, maybe, like probably, but thankfully they chose us and gave us a shot. I mean, I think for me, it's a case of allow people to do what they do best. The Sidemen are the best in the world at what they do specifically as a group of 7 making videos the way they make them. They have amassed a huge audience as a result of that, which shows that they're brilliant at what they do. And yeah, our job is to just make sure that they stay enjoying that. Like if there's one thing, it's like, are they having fun and do they feel like they're bogged down? Are we talking to them every day? We shouldn't be. Like, are we bothering them? We shouldn't be. Like, it should be hands off because then the infrastructure around, it should be hands off and structured so that the infrastructure rolls and they don't feel like we're bothering them. That's the one thing as well I'm really aware of is management can be too intense and too like familiar. It can be too familiar, and I think that can annoy talent more than it is. Like you're kind of there, like go away, like I'm trying to work. And I think as long as it also stays professional and there's that level of go out there. I think the mandate is for me anyway. Go out there and find opportunity. Bring it when it's real. This is how I approach it. Bring it when it's real. Bring it when it's at the level that we would be happy with. Don't bother us otherwise. Don't just chat. Do you know what I mean? Like this, our time is so valuable, and we're work. This is a working relationship. It has to be. And again, I've seen in traditional management that those lines can blend a little bit, and I just find that a bit uncomfortable because, in order to really build, I think something you have to have that corporate professional mindset, and I think it goes further than them trying to be friends with everybody and trying to be familiar with everybody to the extent where the boundaries are crossed and it just becomes muddy. I think if that makes sense.
No, I get that. For somebody who's just tuned in and somehow doesn't know who the Sidemen are, Who are they and why are they so culturally relevant?
Yeah, so the Sidemen are 7 real friends who started playing GTA together back in 2013, and that server basically grew into collaboration between them as individuals, which grew into a channel together called the Sidemen channel. And they launched their channel, I think, in 2019, I want to say, off the back of this YouTube original show. This was when YouTube did their YouTube Red series, so they had their slate of original programming before YouTube Originals, and they did the Sidemen show as one of those commissions. And off the back of that, they started a channel because they needed somewhere to host the show. So it wasn't actually meant to be a collaborative channel in that sense. It was just they needed somewhere to basically host this 7-part show. The show wasn't great. I think they didn't enjoy doing it, and there were problems with the whole process. I think they'd be the first to say that. It was very much like TV trying to do YouTube. So they were just like, oh. But what it did was it actually, in a way, became the best thing because it springboarded their channel. So off the back of that, they started Sidemen Sunday, and then 4-5 years later, they're still going at pace. It must have been 2018, actually, 2018. Something like that, because I think I was at YMU at the time. But anyway, 2018, 17, that sort of period, I can't remember. But yeah, that was off the back of the show. And then since then, it's been Sidemen Sunday uploads for the last many years now on the main channel. And then maybe a year or so in, then more Sidemen started, which was the second channel, which Simon ran. And then Sidemen Reacts as well. So 3 channels now, all building 22 million subs, I think 9 million subs, and then maybe 3 or maybe on React, something like that. No, 5, I think, on React. And then off the back of that, they've built, as I said, all these businesses. Sides, a restaurant, fried chicken chain called Sides, which is in its 6th store, going up to 7 this summer. A vodka brand called XX Vodka, which is stocked around retailers across the country and on trade, Wetherspoons and so on. Best Breakfast, which is a cereal brand, so that's across Tesco's and Morrison's, Iceland, etc., and was featured recently in Love Island. If anyone watched Love Island, and it's planning a bunch of partnerships, and that's a pure retail play, so very different sort of business, but super exciting. And then we've got our fund called Upside. We've got our side cards, trading cards, the collaboration that we did with Tops. We've done 2 charity matches over the last few years. The boys have done 4, I think 4 or 5. I think this one will be their 6th if we do another one. If TBC. And then we've also got, what else we got? Christmas #1 that we got in 2022, Netflix documentary, Inside, the reality show that we recently. So just project after project. I think the key for us, and it's something that actually Josh is very big on, and I think it's a great mindset, is build moments. So I think everything we do is based around moments. So you have those tentpole moments throughout the year, and as long as you have those moments, then the filler is your sort of day-to-day content and everything. But you have the moments which just elevate and lift and do something that's different and people aren't expecting. So that's been our mantra together, really, as a team, is create moments, whether it's launches, brands having new flavors, new ranges, whatever, new collaborations, but then also doing things like charity matches and all the stuff we've done is based around moments, I think. So yeah, plenty more moments to come, I think.
And talking of all those amazing brands, Jordan, can you describe a bit around your process around how do you identify a new product or service, and what's kind of your blueprint for going through that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a few. It started off with that strategy deck. So we had that strategy that we did right at the beginning, baked in all the principles that I had from when I was doing strategy and creative at YMU. So where are you now? What do you represent? Where do you want to be? Very simply, but put across a story and a deck that it sort of articulates it all. And then off the back of that, there were like 15, I remember, focus areas or areas of potential. So things like entering new markets and having representation in America and trying things in China, wherever, all these different things. Building out a restaurant was something which I think they had the idea for a restaurant and alcohol brand. They'd already said like, it'd be sick to do that. And they had a few others which were all based around like side puns. So the idea of like, obviously sides. And they had this idea of originally a hotel chain called Inside, which the name obviously got taken for the show, but Inside, and all these things. So they started off like from the name, and then they worked back a bunch of ideas. They were like, oh, these would be really cool to do. And then that just sort of got put in, I think they were in the back of a cab in a video talking about them, and so just got left there. But they'd had that thought, oh, it'd be sick to one day do that. So those are the priorities, was restaurant, alcohol. And then off the back of that, there were, again, about 9 or 10 more, which then went into a voting tally, and then they voted on them in terms of 1 to 10. So it ranked out pretty much the same as we thought: restaurant, alcohol. Then there were things like hotel, bar, which will kind of come into the main ones anyway. And then things like Side Plus, podcasts, all the things, trading cards. So we've kind of gone through and just tick off the list. And that's been, that mandate. It's the best way I think of doing it, right? You set a mandate at the beginning, you get consensus, you make sure everyone's clear on what they want. And once you've set the strategy, you sort of say, cool, now go and build that, basically. Or can we go and build that? And then you say, yeah, cool, go for it. And then you spend time doing it rather than going day by day. I think it's having the clear mandate and then being able to say, right now, we don't need to speak to you for another for a week. We can go and actually go and do it, and we'll update you when it's further along, or when we need you to kind of, opine and bring what you do in. So we need to find the partners, the operational expertise, etc. And then again, allow the Sidemen to do what they do best. Be creative. Here's the brand. What do you think? Like, how would you shape this? What products do you want? How do you, and so on and so forth. And it's finding that balance again between doing too much of that as well as being autonomous and knowing what you think they'd like and reading the room. Again, self-awareness. I said this to someone the other day. I think self-awareness is the most important trait you could possibly have. It's like, just be honest and humble and real with reality, with life. Because I think the people who thrive are the ones who are self-aware, is what I've definitely come to realize. And even things like this, self-awareness around their time, self-awareness around how much you're bothering, self-awareness around how important you really are, self-awareness around, partnerships, everything. It just requires self-awareness. That's the number one trait, increasingly, I think, as I get older. So yeah, that's how we did it, really. And then it's just been a case of 4 years and still doing it, still building now.
I love that. And talking of that kind of matrix and prioritization, when you've identified all these potential options for brands, how do you kind of manage the commercial side of it versus what they actually want to do? You obviously said restaurants is really high on their priority list, but maybe the business model wasn't that good.
Oh, restaurants suck as business model. It's terrible. So the key with this is always partnership. I think, again, as a mindset, you want to be, Sidemen bring their IP and their ability to get brands from 0 to 1, to launch on social, to scale. I think it's harder now in a way than it was, and actually we did everything at a good time. 2021, the world was weird and very, I think, just in a daze from COVID, so everyone was very excited and wanted new things and were just very into content and into the content of business and everything in a way that maybe isn't the same now. And if you see, even interestingly, there's been a big shift with even people like your Kylie Jenners of the world and your big celebrities and your big social stars who can't move product, they can't move audiences. People don't care anymore in the same way. Sidemen have an exceptional audience, exceptional community because it's so long-standing. But yeah, we're in a very different time now to what it was in 2021. So anyway, we launched obviously a number of things. And yeah, I think it's about commercially building out partnerships whereby the partner is operating, running the business behind the scenes, day to day, and they're experts in what they do. That's the key. So it's finding us bringing creativity, finding operational heavyweight partners, sharing in the business fully and being aligned and incentivized together so that they're running it while you're doing other things, and also you're opining on the things you can do well, but you're not trying to understand health and safety in a 200 square foot restaurant. You know what I mean? Like, that stuff is just hideous and boring and nothing that any of us want to do or are interested in. And I think it's having, again, self-awareness to know what you're good at, know what you're bad at, and find partners who can fill that gap. And then commercially, have partners take the operational and commercial risk as part of their deal, right? That's really important. I think when you're bringing an audience and the value that the Sidemen have created for however long, it's having partners who are willing to cash flow the business, to operate, to scale, and who have skin in the game totally with us on it, but not making the Sidemen exposed to all these business models that they're not experts in, because these things are quite high risk. So again, I think that steadies the ship if the partner is financially in to these projects, but also operationally responsible. So it means that they have to make it work for them to get the money back, right? And then obviously we do our bits, we have our commitments, we know what we have to do as well, and then we work together to scale it. But also I think it's realizing that there's more similarity between business models than maybe, again, there were, because everything, especially in our world, hinges off the guys is a 0 to 1, but then beyond that, it's tapping into their sort of theme and their creative, I guess, essence, the thing that makes them them, but then translating that to the different worlds of the brand. So it still has that thread of them in them in terms of day-to-day social and things like that. So actually we have a quite interesting structure. We have one sort of group CEO, if you will, of the brands now called Robin, who's amazing. And then we have Phil, who's a marketing director across the 3 brands. And then we have teams for each of the brands. Best is super lean because of retail business, low margin. You can't scale out a massive team there. You don't need to. You just need a social person, really. Someone who just manage social. And then Phil, myself, Robin, we do the rest. XX Vodka has got a team. Obviously, there's more things to do there. Account management, social, things like that, and so on. Just more traditional marketing, trade marketing, etc. Then you have Sides, which has, again, account management, going out into the different franchise partners to their stores, making sure everything's all right. So obviously social marketing, etc. too, but they all sit within those teams, and then that's kind of our remit. Everything else really sits with our partners.
One thing that's really come across in this interview, Jordan, is a phrase I came across the other day, actually, is that basically that says, it's not how, it's who. And actually
Totally.
finding the right people to connect and do business together. And I think that's a massively underrated skill that you obviously have in abundance.
Oh, mate, thank you. I mean, I think you're so right. Like, it's about finding people, again, self-awareness. People who are better than you know that you are not very good and that you are probably average. And there are many smart people out there who are better at executing and probably love it also more than you do and have the desire and the drive. A lot of this is about finding people with drive and desire and knowing how that matches with your own. And obviously, look, there are some people out there who all they ever want to do is build, a huge business in their space, whatever, and they're driven by the ambition of scale and growth and the end. Like, for me, I'm not like that. I'm more into the process and getting there. And actually, it's not about, right, we need to exit within this amount of time. We need to do this incredibly huge scale business and build it. So I know I want to build something that's really good and find people who are brilliant, who are also probably, more driven than me, more ambitious than me, more hungry than me. Find people who are willing to really dig in deep and drive these things and then incentivize them. And then you've got somebody there working ultimately for and with you who is 10 times more even motivated than you are. Great, cool. That's how know this is gonna work in the end, right? So I think it's just, again, self-awareness, not pretending that you have to hustle your way to success. Because actually, if you find people who are, again, better than you, then they'll do it for you, right? And then you can do more things and you can stay where you know you're best. And I think, again, it's knowing your place. And I would say our place is around being the creative IP content first home of this brand, and then finding partners who can operationally build things and who have the credibility and experience to do that.
As a startup founder, finding product market fit is your top priority. But landing bigger customers requires SOC 2 or ISO 27001 compliance, a time-consuming process that pulls you away from building and shipping. That's where Vanta comes in. By automating up to 90% of the work, Vanta gets you compliant fast, opening doors to next-level growth opportunities. Whether you're closing your first deal or gearing up for growth, Vanta makes compliance easy. Get $1,000 off at vanta.com/founded. That's vanta.com/founded for $1,000 off.
Jordan's story is a really great example of what happens when you take action, when you experiment, when you build the right networks. But I think it also became really clear when I was listening to the interview that success isn't just about that hard work and risk-taking. There was also a sense of kind of creating access, maybe building off opportunities or privilege that you already have and being in the right place at the right time. Those things play a huge role in how you shape opportunities. And I'm sure there's some people listening in out there who feel like, well, we're not starting from the same place as Jordan. Like, I'm not an 18-year-old who feels like they can access the emails of Vice, or whatever the equivalent would be right now. But I think we can still take loads of lessons from Jordan's story and not mimic it, but make some of these lessons work for you and your particular circumstances.
Yeah, I think everyone's story is different, right? But there's definitely elements of this story that you can apply to your own business, your own thinking, your own mindset that's going to really put you in good stead for building out a personal brand and creating online content.
Absolutely. I think for me, it was the sort of strategic experimentation and collaborators came across really strong in this for me. It was like, how can you find the right people to collaborate with? So you bring your strengths along and then you marry that with other people's strengths. And that was something that came across really strongly as I was listening to this interview. So I wanted to dive in a little bit more in our conversation around this role of experimentation and risk-taking. And, we've talked about this loads of times in different episodes, but the why not attitude was something that came across a lot. And I was really reflecting on it for myself and thinking about some of the other entrepreneurs I know as well. And of course, as you mentioned, fear is something that stops us from saying why not. But I think that there are other factors at play as well. So for example, for me, it's overwhelm or it's too many opportunities. Like, this is often what stops me from kind of doing that why not, is I can't see the wood from the trees. I don't even know which opportunity to grasp. How do you think people can get more clear and focused so that they can see those opportunities and say, why not, when the right thing comes along?
Yeah, I think the first thing to say is like, if you've got more opportunities or goals or priorities that you can count on one hand, then they're just not going to happen. Like, you need to be laser focused on, right, this is the number one thing. And then maybe you've got a second and third goal. But if you're putting all of your energy and attention into that number one goal, then it's going to happen. Otherwise, you're literally spreading yourself too thinly across all of those competing priorities in terms of energy and time and, yeah, just getting things done. So that's the first thing I'd say. I think in terms of like, yeah, how do you cultivate relationships with interesting people? That's the crux of this. I think what you should do is you should really try and reach out to those people that you admire, that you want to be building relationships with, because that's going to make opportunities happen if you're connecting with the right people who think how you think, also who've already done it in terms of being a success, however you define that. So I think it's about really reaching out to the right people and just starting those relationships. Like, don't expect anything from it early on. Like, you're building those bridges. So start small, but do have that strategic end goal in mind. If you're constantly trying to cultivate these relationships, then, you know, one of them is going to come off somewhere down the line. And I think if you're focused on that, then it's definitely something that's tangible, and it's going to show up for you. The other thing I would say is that it's really important to, when you're going into these conversations, to think about what's in it for them. Like, you know what's in it for you, right? That's obvious. But put yourself in their shoes. Like, really think about what are they going to get from it? You know, what is the win-win? Where is that, you know, that overlap in that Venn diagram? So I would say, yeah, have that in mind when you're reaching out to these people, and then success will come.
It's interesting you say that, because audiences also come a lot throughout this podcast episode, and it's the same thing there, right? What's in it for your audience? And then that was something else that Jordan was talking about. So I think always trying to think about those two sides of the coin, like, what do you want, being focused about what you want and where you're trying to get to, but also then, yeah, what's in it for them, and that becomes a true collaboration. It's not like a hierarchical thing where you're trying to get something out of somebody else and you're just at their mercy. It's so, how do we build together in order to create something that's going to excite us and motivate us and energize us? And so I think that that's such an important thing to bear in mind when you're talking to people. Like I said, so it doesn't just feel like you're taking. In terms of saying why not and taking risks, of course, those risks lead to success, as Jordan's described, but also sometimes they don't necessarily lead down that path. Do you have any examples of when saying why not has maybe not worked out, or has been a risk that hasn't paid off?
Yeah, I mean, we wouldn't be sat here now having this conversation if I didn't just think, why not, in terms of starting this podcast. It came about as an opportunity with somebody I met at a workshop I was delivering, who lived locally to me, Andrew Parsonage, who helped co-found the show. And, you know, he had a background in audio, community radio, had a amazing hosting voice. And I had the contacts and the network in the entrepreneur ecosystem. And we just thought, right, let's combine forces. Let's give it a shot. I was begging founders to come on the show initially, and then we're in a privileged position today where we can literally cherry pick the people that we want to come onto the show. But if I put all of those barriers out, you know, what are people going to think? Who's going to listen? What am I going to sound like? You know, how are we going to come across? How is it going to be edited? Like, there's so many barriers there. The best way is always to start small, do a pilot of something, and then sort of iterate from there. And as Jordan says, like, literally experiment with it, and you'll get signs. I think if people are trying to sharpen the idea in their head, then you'll just literally be going around in circles chasing your own tail. So it's definitely important to really get feedback from the marketplace and iterate from there, and start small, be consistent, take those steps. And that's why we're here today. In terms of, when why not hasn't worked for me, maybe a more interesting question. Going back to my days of running my consultancy, like, we were running a peer learning community, and there was a lot of focus online about building out online classes.
Mm-hmm.
And there's this amazing stat that only 18% of classes, online courses, are completed.
Yeah.
People get the energy, and then it just falls off a cliff, right? A natural part of human nature, I guess. So I was like, I want to solve this problem. We've got some really good content. We've got a captive audience of early stage founders. And basically, it didn't work for a number of reasons. Firstly, was that the market for entrepreneurship courses is so oversaturated.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you're competing with the likes of, Piers Linney, Peter Jones, Stephen Bartlett. Who's Ollie Collard? Like, do you know what I mean? It's
You're Ollie Collard.
yeah. But do you know what I mean? It's such an oversaturated place
Yeah.
that actually the timing for that probably wasn't right. The demand wasn't right. So I started creating it, and then quickly realized that there wasn't enough bite there, and I had to quickly give it up. I think I was pulled in by all of the online stuff about, building passive income and selling courses when you sleep and all of that.
Yeah.
Quite honestly, is a load of BS.
We've all been there, though.
Yeah.
It sounds like the dream, right? But it's not necessarily the reality. And actually, we'll come on to talking about this a little bit more, I think, later on in the episode too, in terms of content and how you lever that in order to make money. I was thinking about this question because I was like, I say why not quite a lot, actually. And I think that since early in my career, I found myself in a position where I was like, no, I'm going to do things a bit differently. And if something interests me or if people interest me, I'm going to say why not. And as I was thinking about, has that led to some really kind of failures or some darker times? Or in some ways, yes. But I'd say every single time I've come out with something and I've been able to evolve, even if it's just myself, my own skills, knowing myself better, knowing what I want to say yes to next time.
Yeah.
So it's interesting that it may not always lead you, perhaps from a financial or a business perspective, to that place that you wanted to go. But I think that it almost always does expand your networks, expand your understanding of yourself. So from my perspective, I'm always like, why not say why not? Let's keep moving forwards, because I think that's how we evolve.
I think it's a mindset as well of just thinking, why not? Like, why not me? Why not now? Just give it a go, give it a shot. You never know where it's going to go. I find often the phrase is often true that, if you ask for advice, then you end up getting money. And if you ask for money, you end up getting advice. And you never know where these things are going to go. Like, they might turn into, mentoring relationships. They might turn into partners, suppliers, joint ventures. Like, if you don't explore that initial conversation, then you don't know where it's going to go. And that's why entrepreneurship is so intriguing, because it's a bloody messy path, but there's some amazing paths that open up as a result of exploring.
Yeah. I think one of the reasons entrepreneurship allows you to explore and allows that expansiveness is the people and the opportunities that can come from building those strategic partnerships. And so finding the right people to execute your ideas, or even to enhance your ideas, to evolve them, rather than trying to do everything alone, is part of an entrepreneurial life. And it's really exciting to think that every time you have some kind of interaction with somebody, that could just be opening the door to like a brand new universe, basically, brand new life for you. So one of the things that Jordan was stressing was this idea of focusing on your own strengths and not spending all your time trying to do something where you know that maybe it's a weakness or it's something that you don't like doing, it's draining. How do you think that this actually plays out in the real world, in real life? Because we all have to do things that we don't want to do sometimes, or maybe that aren't our strengths. So for early stage entrepreneurs who are perhaps trying to think about how to do this, and use their strengths and really highlight their strengths, but maybe they're still on their own doing things, what do you think they can do to get to that position of being able to focus more on the things that they are really good at and they want to be focusing on?
Yeah, it's a bit of a paradox, I think, in early stage entrepreneurship. I think you've got to be that Swiss Army knife of being able to do multiple things with multiple different hats on. And that's just the nature of entrepreneurship. So I think you've got to take that into account. However, what I would say is be very clear on what your time is worth. Put a financial figure on that, work it out. And then if a job isn't worth your time, then 99% of the time you are better outsourcing it.
Yeah.
And I appreciate, if you're, pre-revenue, that's going to be very difficult unless you've got funding. But I think you've got to be able to think about where is the best lever to spend my time. And you're going to have more impact, whether that's creating content or jumping on sales calls or running webinars, whatever that thing is or things are, then you really should try and focus your energy and time there. Like if you don't have a clue about SEO, trying to understand SEO as an example is a bit of a minefield. So I would say it's far better to outsource, but with the caveat of having that kind of foundational understanding of those different business elements. Because if you're outsourcing stuff without having any prior knowledge, then it's just going to become quite messy.
A lot of founders that I work with find themselves in this paradox, but I think they get quite blinkered in terms of what the solutions might be. So they're either thinking, well, we need money so that we can hire people, or they're thinking, I need a co-founder. And I think that comes with a whole bunch of other like cans of worms. The thing that I think was really highlighted in this episode, and definitely something I'm taking away, is the value of partnerships. And it doesn't have to be somebody who's on your payroll that's working with you. It doesn't have to be somebody that you're a co-director, co-founder with. You can do this by using your skills to augment something that other people are already doing. Where are their gaps that you can fill, and vice versa? And so thinking about it from a strategic partnership perspective, rather than thinking about it from a kind of doing it within your own kind of business, I think is really powerful. One of the reasons I think people are maybe scared of that is because they're like, there's a control aspect of, well, if everything's in my business, then I have control over everything. But actually, you're likely to go a lot further, a lot more quickly if you can find those organizations to partner with and really find those areas where you can plug their gaps and vice versa.
Yeah, and it's a scary thing to do, right? Because you're putting your head above the parapet and, you're having those conversations, you're exposing yourself, your business, but you won't find those opportunities unless you do that discovery phase. I think what you've got to bear in mind, like you said, is identifying what those gaps are, but also who has access to a similar audience, who shares the same values of you, the same ethics. It's in very simple terms, it is the whole classic, what is the 1 + 1? Is it equal to 3 or more? And that's where you do get that shared value. I mean, in terms of a recent example, when I saw it online that I love recently in the kind of startup ecosystem was Simon Squibb, who's been a former guest on Founded and Grounded with his business that was called Purposeful Projects, now called Help Bank. You would have seen some of his pitches to his doorbells in his disused staircase. It's a great way to kind of inspire entrepreneurs to come and pitch their businesses. This was picked up by the Virgin startup team in Virgin and Richard Branson. And basically they've done a collab now where they're putting the doorbell in Virgin hotels in Shoreditch, and entrepreneurs are now rocking up and doing the same thing there. So I think like the power, it doesn't matter how big you are. Obviously these are two quite big organizations, but it doesn't matter. Like if you've got shared opportunity, shared audience, like the power of that together, their socials would have exploded due to this collaboration. So just something to think about.
Absolutely. And I think, again, it comes back to the why not and the fears that might stand in that way. But at the end of the day, if all you're doing is sitting in your fears and going, but maybe I don't want to work with that bigger player because are they going to exploit us? Are they going to take our IP? Are they going to take all my ideas or whatever else those fears might be? I mean, yes, those things are a risk, but isn't it a bigger risk to stay where you are, stay still, and not ever be able to take anything off the ground? So it comes back to the why not.
So my advice really is to take that leap of faith and just see where it goes.
So talking about some of those things that might be stopping people or that they should be aware of, what do you think the big risks are in terms of working with external partners, and how can they be mitigated?
I think you've covered some of them in terms of like risk to IP, not working commercially. I mean, there are a ton of risks, right? I think the first thing that you need to consider is really doing your due diligence on your potential partners. Like, what's their credibility, right? Doing basic things like checking company's house, speaking to their customers, speaking to some of their other strategic partners. Like, these are some really basic things that you can do. Like, I think the whole world of entrepreneurship at the moment is everyone talks a good game, but actually, are they going to deliver with actions? That's what you've got to be really wary of. Like, you'll see people on LinkedIn with investor, 4 times founder, keynote speaker, mentor, university lecturer. And you're just going, really? All of those things? Whereas if you saw somebody with their profile saying, I got lucky on an early investment in Uber and 3 failed companies, 1 exit, spoke at a few stages a couple of times, gave my advice to founders and my 2 pennies worth, but I got loads from it personally. Like, I think the people who've already made it and accumulated particularly wealth, they're not trying to evidence it and show it. So I think it's about just like some of those red flags, just being aware of those as well.
Yeah. I love that you've just said that, because you've sort of just got rid of all my LinkedIn imposter syndrome in one sentence as well. Because there is a lot of that. And there's a lot of, it's easy to put it on a pedestal a little bit. But you're right. Like, how often is there full reality behind that? Like, who are the people? What are they actually doing? How are they going to work with you? And if that's not in alignment with what you are and how you want to show up, then whatever they've got written in that LinkedIn bio doesn't really matter, right? But like you said, probably if there's a bit more humility in there, then that's going to be an indication that might be somebody who's willing to give and take and have a positive working relationship. So let's shift gears now and explore how work, leadership, and corporate culture is evolving. I think definitely my experience is that it's evolving. Obviously, I work a lot in organizational talent, in leadership, and we're seeing changes. We're also seeing places where things aren't changing, or maybe they're changing for the worse. So I'm really interested to hear more about Jordan's take on work-life balance and productivity, and why traditional corporate structures are being challenged now like never before.
Jordan, why is evoking emotion so important for content creators, and what's your process for doing this?
Yes, I think emotion I'll go back slightly. So if you think about why people are on social and why people bother, I think most people are addicted to their phones. Most people are using social media as relief in a difficult world. So if you take that as your starting point as to why they're there in the first place, relief, a break, not necessarily to be lectured to, not necessarily to be educated, to be mentally drained more than they already are. Obviously, different people do different things at different times, but generally speaking, people go for entertainment, they go for relief, they go for some fun. So I think, how do you then tap into the desire for relief and also the desire to feel something? Because people go to feel, right? You stop on a video because it makes you feel something fundamentally, and you might see a picture that makes you feel sad or feel inspired or feel like you want to laugh, whatever it might be. So if you think about how you and all of us actually use social, it's all driven by essentially an emotional filter of, does this make me feel anything? No, next. Does it make me laugh? Does it make me cry? Whatever. It has to trigger something, or else I'll just swipe. So that's the why, as to why and how people use social. We use it for relief. We do so through filtering emotion and through filtering emotional triggers to see if something makes us feel anything. And if we don't, we swipe. So therefore, content has to make you feel something, or else you're just going to swipe. It's very simple, right? It's not rocket science, I don't think. But yeah, it has to make you feel something. Otherwise, you're going to swipe. And I think some people embed emotion very just through being themselves and being, I think the Sidemen, obviously they do it through entertainment, through humor, through fun, through trying to be light in everything that they do. Some creators do it through being inspiring and uplifting and motivational and, or even melancholic and quite somber, whatever. But I think, for us as a team, it's just about giving people entertainment more than anything. And I think for the boys, they're driven by the desire to keep people fun and to keep people entertained, which is why everything stays light. They don't dive into some of the more serious issues that you could. But I think people, again, when that's all you're flooded with, it doesn't tick relief, right? People go to social for relief. They can get the more heavy news or topical stuff somewhere else potentially. But I think from the Sidemen, they know what they are, which is entertainment first and foremost, which I think has carried them, because then that's why people enjoy watching them every week, every day, because it's entertaining, it's fun. They're getting something light in a world that's increasingly heavy. So I think that's something which for every creator out there is knowing what emotion you're actually there for. Like how do you tap into a relief? How do you make people feel at ease with what you're watching? It can't be too serious. It can't be too dreary. It has to be something that sort of seamlessly weaves into people's search for relief and calm and contentment, which is what they're doing when they're scrolling all day, every day, or all evening after a long day at work. But then how do you give them something that triggers emotion in a way that is real, right? And I think you have to have that. And it all goes back actually to when I was at Lab Bible, and there was a lot of great strategy that they employed on their editorial team around some of this stuff. And they had this emotional framework where all of their content had to tick one of the boxes of emotion. If it didn't, it wouldn't go out. And it was a really good way of sense checking before it went out. Are they trying to trigger something? And you could say maybe it's manipulative, it slightly is, but that's how news works, right? It has to trigger emotion. Otherwise, don't do it. It's not going to work. Go on the Daily Mail and see how they write. There's a reason they write how they write. You know, the reason why Donald Trump was so effective in his first campaign on Twitter. Everything was emotionally provocative. So, I think that's a really important way of thinking and looking at social. And if you're not providing or provoking emotion, then you probably won't get the results, I don't think.
Yeah, they often say like you've spent 80 pence in the pound in terms of like the headline and the hook, whatever it is. So that's why it's so important, right?
And and why? Because people go to, historically, they didn't have social media. They would go to traditional media for the same level of relief or for insight, for inspiration, for something. So if you're not provoking, you're not feeding people what they're after. So they're not going to stay at your restaurant, basically. Terrible analogy, but you get what I'm saying.
Yeah. And Jordan, I'm really interested to know, like, who keeps you like firing in all cylinders and operating at your best?
That's a good question. I mean, I think the team around me, from a work perspective anyway, I think the team is great. And also I think I love meeting people. I love networking. I love getting out there. I love being in and around great characters. I love finding opportunity where there wasn't any, and also activating things that make people sit up and go, that was really cool. I think work is not my life. Like, it's definitely not my life. And I think it's dangerous when it is. So I would never say that, you know, I'm totally driven 100% by work and that's like everything, because it's a fraction realistically. But I enjoy it and I love it. And I've never been more excited right now for what we're building, to be honest, because I think there's so much opportunity out there, and it's about how we go after it in a way that's, that's exciting and meaningful and fun more than anything. So it's almost like work is relief in a way for me, weirdly. But especially when you've got kids as well, right? It's like children are work, right? As you know very well. And actually work becomes relief. So again, how does it become a ride worth going on? How does it become fun rather than too heavy, too serious, too ambitious in the wrong way? I think it's about building an environment where, yes, you're obviously making money. Yes, it's commercial. Yes, it's forward-looking, but also it's just fun and actually everyone's having a good time and you're looking after people and people like to work with you, you know?
I love that. I think, people need to boil it down to the simplest possible thing, don't they? And like, what makes you happy? What motivates you? What gets you out of bed in the morning? And
totally.
Can you do that alongside having a family? And if you can't, then something's got to change. But I think now we're living in a world which, post-COVID anyway, like, you know, mental health is a big topic. I think people are more aware of people's boundaries. People are more understanding, generally speaking. And I think actually, you know, being a parent, running a business is more viable these days.
Totally. But also I think it's, you know, a big thing for me and for us, hopefully, as a company. And I think, you know, depends on the role, obviously. Some roles are more physically demanding than others. But how do you make work for your life rather than life work for your work? You know, I think that's the age we're in now, where Gen Z are running companies or are starting to in a position of actually, why do we do all this corporate like silly stuff? Why are you forcing people to sit at a desk pretending they're working for 8 hours when actually their work was done in 3 or 4, or they could do the rest at home or whatever, which definitely pervaded. And I even saw some of that when I was at Lab Bible and Advice and just in and around corporate culture in 2016, 17, right? Where it's like, why do we do this weird game of pretense and pretending? And the whole thing just didn't make sense. And some things, of course, were great. And actually, you know, you think about the office culture and how many good things are a part of that, but then you also think about how many bad things are a part of that. And actually, surely it's just about creating, what's the office for? Is it to pretend we're all doing something, or actually is it to create an environment for people to work? And if it's an environment for people to work, then surely it should be based on the output of the work rather than being prescriptive to the extent where it becomes fake, right? If it's not actually meaningful for you to do your work in the office, why are you forcing people to be there? For example, if they have to be for whatever reason, then okay, that makes sense. It's the space that they need to work in for the job they're doing. But surely it should be output driven. And of course, culture, there's a balancing act with, young staff and people who are coming through and actually training and all these things which can get lost. But people adapt, right? I mean, like Gen Z are very good, I think, at learning. So you can learn on YouTube. I don't know. I just think it should be about output and about, again, self-awareness rather than the pretense of how we want work to look, which I think pervaded for so long. And I think young people just aren't here for it. They don't have the time, can't be bothered.
Yeah, I agree. And I think the corporate culture that has been built up is very misleading. I think the answer lies in because it's always been done this way. But it takes people to challenge that in order for it to change. And I think that's great what young people are doing in order to kind of change workplace culture and, like you say, focus on outputs rather than time spent at a desk. Like,
totally.
That's such a better metric, right?
Totally. But also I think if you're aligning people properly with pay and with, future incentives and you're giving people real reason to stay and to work hard, they'll work well. And also if you're creating a good culture that's self-aware, and then people just don't like BS, right? People want self-awareness in their work now. And Gen Z, if there's one thing that I would say, obviously there's many crazy things going on with our generation, but one thing that I would say is real is self-awareness, right? There's a level, I think, of honesty that is quite direct and quite sharp, and it cuts through some of the, how would you describe it? Some of the dances that maybe the older generations have played for a long time. They're just a part of the culture, which don't make sense. And I think that direct honesty to be like, no, that, like, why are we doing that? Or I know if I'm getting paid from 9 to 5, I'm leaving at 5 because I need to get home and actually live. Like, work isn't your life. And if people again aren't making a lot of money, if cost of living crisis is what it is, which it is today, very difficult. You're not going to get a house. You're not going to maybe even leave your parents for a long time if you have parents home to live in. Why do those things? For what end? Because traditionally it was done so you could rise through the ranks. Well, are you even going to rise through the ranks today? What ranks? Is it, even if you rise through the ranks, is it even going to be worth it? Okay, you get to a stage where you're making X, but can you even still, you can't do any of the things that you used to, right? So what's the point? Like, why make money? What's the point? It's not just for the game of corporate culture, right? So yeah, I think, and we're seeing that, you look on TikTok, right? A lot of young people are increasingly self-aware as to the nonsense of that whole lie, right? It's another lie. You come out of university, you get lied once. You go into corporate life, you get lied to again. And people then waste their 20s and they end up 30, 35, 40, whatever. And they feel like they've not lived because they've spent all their time playing this dance, which has not provided any fruit. And it's been totally driven by materialism and this idea of goals and ambition and success, but it's led to people being really miserable, right? So I don't know. I just think it's it's time to end the lies of it all, man, and just be honest. I think self-awareness again comes through, and we'll always win with these type of things.
And talking about obviously some of the good traits of Gen Z there about self-awareness and seeing through the BS, which I completely agree with. What are some of the misconceptions then about Gen Z, would you say?
I'd say like Gen Z are, I think Gen Z have far more fearlessness because they have way less to lose because they don't have anything. So when you have a generation that, again, for all the reasons we just spoke about, don't have access to even the ambition of owning a house or even maybe having a family or finding a partner who's in any way like responsible or can sustain a family, all these things, you're led to you're kind of creating a generation of people who just don't care. They're apathetic, and they're apathetic because they have genuinely nothing to lose. So there's a fearlessness, but also an apathy there. So fearlessness on one hand, in the sense that they just go, well, why am I scared of this employer? They're not paying me well anyway. Even if I did rise through the ranks, I'm not going to get very far. What's the point? So no, I'm not going to do your silly task at 9 p.m. at night. I'm going to switch my phone off and go to bed. No. So there's more boundaries, I think. But I think misconceptions are sometimes that Gen Z are lazy, and I just think it's that Gen Z are apathetic often because why bother? And that's, I think, important for people to realize. So, okay, cool. How do you unlock productivity? You incentivize and align people properly. You give them something to hope for. You give them a purpose. You give them a vision, something that's deeper and more meaningful from a work perspective than just, your minimum wage paycheck at a junior level until you're ready to get promoted to another, what would have been minimum wage job with inflation maybe 5-6 years ago. So I don't know. I just think it's, apathy is the number one pervading feeling, I think, amongst Gen Z, because why bother? And a lot of people are struggling. So with that in mind, it's less about laziness, more about motivation, a lack of motivation, because there's a lack of potential output and fruit. You don't have much to shoot for. Why shoot? Why bother? So you have to give people reasons to do that. And that's also things like employers caring more, looking after people more, almost filling in for a lot of parents as well. I think there's also a generation of people who have had some of the more social, like the more, I guess, some of the trends you've seen right around parents being way more consumed with work, less time at home, more split families, all this stuff. So people are more vulnerable coming into the workforce. I think, like for me, employers should be more sensitive to the full picture of how people are experiencing life, because they become almost like a proto-family or proto-parent. I don't know, it's a weird relationship now. It's different to how it was. And I think if you want to get people on side who are young, you need to dig in and really listen, be empathetic, be open, treat them more on a level, and stop trying to, again, put them through those ranks, because those ranks aren't what you're aiming for. It's the fundamental, like, why bother? If there's no purpose, you're not going to do anything. You're not going to try. And but then they get labeled as lazy. So yeah, I don't know.
Need to cut through the power play, then remove ego from it, and like you say, just have a conversation on a level with somebody. Age is a number, right?
Totally. Times have changed, and the young generation coming through won't play the same game. So you have to be more open to how they want work to be as well, and try and shape it for them as much as you're trying to make them shape to you, because you're not necessarily right. And if it's not providing output, then you're not going to win with the next generation. You're going to have no employees who are relevant and coming through, right? Because all of them will be older and more, they'll be retiring and dying eventually. So you need to be changing your culture rather than trying to make Gen Z mold, and be aware of these factors. You and as a CEO, founder, whatever, sitting in a very high paid job, and you've been able to collect great money over the years, buy your house, you're settled, you're cool. Like, you're in a very totally different world to young kids today who are coming through and have none of those prospects available really to them, if you're being honest. So yeah, sensitivity, empathy, a bit more compassion, I think, to the bigger picture, and not just say, oh, Gen Z are lazy and useless and annoying. It's like, well, yeah, they might be, but there's a reason. I think that's the thing. It's not just saying, yeah, well, they're not lazy. Well, no, I would say they're apathetic.
There's a difference there.
There's a difference there, yeah. You can unlock, I think, a lot with this generation if you frame it right and if you're more on a level with them.
Love that, Jordan. In part one, we talked a bit about people going onto socials to avoid what's going on with their life, talking about dark times. What's your biggest fear, Jordan?
My biggest fear? It's a good question. What's my biggest fear? On like what kind of level? Is there like
let's go deep. Let's go deep.
Where do you want do you want this to go on a sort of work level? Do you want it to go on a family level? Like where would you like it?
The deepest sense of your personal.
The deepest. Okay, so the deepest fear. So for me, on like a. Again, this probably frames most of this conversation, but it's probably the most important thing in my life. So I'm Catholic, traditionally Catholic. My faith and my religion is like the most important part of my life, without a doubt. And actually, it guides everything else. So for me, my purpose is a lot more based on like dying in a state of grace, becoming a saint, going to heaven, being living a life of virtue, growing in virtue, staying away from grave sin, being in a life of order, and producing peace through my vocation as a husband and father. So like my fear really is always about losing grace and falling into who I was when I was younger, right? Like living terribly and doing all sorts of stuff, right? As most people who, especially in this culture, in this world, as Gen Z do. So yeah, I'd say like my biggest fear is always like ultimately God and the offense of God and the slipping back into a life of habitual sin, which I was definitely in for a very, very long time, and therefore falling into all of the kind of trappings and the, I guess, I've never been depressed or anything, but falling into the sort of just the sterile misery of a life that's disordered. And I've managed to, through grace, ultimately, completely changed from the person that I was for the first 20 years, 19 years of my life. I was deeply atheistic, deeply secular. So I have that's a whole nother podcast, but converted maybe like 6 years ago, something like that. From literally nothing. Like I was the first Catholic I ever met, read my way in through history, philosophy, theology, etc. And totally transformed my life. Like literally total transformation. And I think that for me is always not the fear, but it's the rod on your back a little bit, which is like who you could be. It's the self-awareness piece, who you really are, who you could be. Through grace, who you've become, and actually you don't want to go back to that, because like that life and being in that sort of state of, just I guess, materially driven, sensually driven, misery. It's not fun. And that's how most people live. Most people are embroiled in that, and not for it through any merit of my own am I not like that. So I think it's having that kind of constant awareness that that's not too far away. That's probably quite a deep answer, but hopefully that makes sense.
I love it. Thank you for being so open and honest there,
sense.
Jordan. It's but it is through merit of your own, because you've gone on that journey, right? That's a journey that you've been on, and you found a higher purpose, whatever you want to call that, whether people are religious or not. You've got this higher sense of purpose, and you live by that. And you talk there about some of the traits or behaviors that you were previously exhibiting. Like, could you just expand a bit on?
Yeah, totally.
On that?
Well, I think, just to that point, I think it's about finding truth, right? So I think rather than it being maybe a higher purpose as such, it's that we go through life in our age totally disconnected from history, totally disconnected from philosophy, totally disconnected from order. And so everyone's disordered, everyone's depressed, and generally everyone's anxious, everyone struggles with understanding why, because they don't have God, they don't have an understanding of the reality of God that isn't this sort of fake picture, but is a necessity. And so I think for me, it's a case of having an understanding of truth, knowing what truth is. I've always been fascinated by the concept of truth, and have always been obsessive about politics and history and all these things. I've loved this stuff through the last 10, 12 years of my life, because really since I was about 13, 14, because again, it's like, I've always felt like I was pulled to truth. I had a great kind of respect for the notion of, but why? Constantly, with everything. And I think, for me, it's order. Like, order comes, so peace is defined as the tranquility of order. And actually, when you have order in your life, you have peace, and order must be about aligning who you are with why, with purpose, with not just a sort of fake purpose or I would say, a sort of, a material purpose, but it has to be a purpose that's rooted in truth. Otherwise, it's just made up. I could say my purpose is to be in this room right now, well, to an extent, but it's not why I live my life, right? Yeah. Or my purpose is to, be a drug addict or be an alcoholic or whatever, and that's completely made up by me. That's not true. Just because I say it's true doesn't make it true. So what is real purpose? What is the truth of this existence? And so finding that and coming into that and understanding the historicity of that and the depth of that and the reality of that, and then everything clicking in your life as a result of that is phenomenally life-changing, and gives you total peace and tranquility in the world materially, because you know why, and you also have a code and understanding of why that is real. So I think that for me is the best thing, and it's given me infinite amounts of kind of, what's the word? Yeah, just order. It's ordered my entire life. And I say not through my merit, because as a Catholic, traditional Catholic, I'd always say that it's through the grace of God. It's not through me. It's through grace, which is the enlightening of the mind, strengthening of the will that comes supernaturally, which lifts you. And that literally happened to my life, like 360, to kind of expand as to maybe how I was living. It was more just kind of growing up in a super secular atheistic society whereby sensual pleasure, materialism, liberal democracy, all these things just are the code. That's just life. That's the religion, is just quote unquote liberty and freedom, do whatever you want. And that leads you to doing things like, getting involved in just too much partying, like drugs, drinking, like whatever it is, too many, sleeping around, all this stuff that just pervades amongst young people. And that's just the culture. That was the culture of all my friends, all the people that I was around, right? And even going through the world of work. I worked, ironically, at Vice, right? For however many years. I worked at Labable, these cultures of work, which are pervaded with all this stuff, right? And that, I think it changed after COVID. There's definitely a shift there. But pre-COVID, that was just the order of the day. So I think, me being a part of that, being young and in that whole world, like there's a lot you have to then sort of just navigate and deal with. And I think for me, it led to a number of things, just generally feeling, again, you feel lost because you're sort of chasing. You're in the world of work, you feel like work is your order, but it's obviously not. That's like completely fake and material. But then you're driven by just going out and drinking and pubs and parties and whatever else that comes with that. And it just causes havoc, I think, as it does for most people, one way, shape or form. So I think that was kind of my experience there. And also I had all my friends at uni, right? So it's partly why I'm so anti-uni, because I know what it was like. I was there, I did like my own field study of going to Manchester, Bristol, Brighton, Leeds, probably as a 4, pretty much every weekend nearly for like a year and a half. And I'm like, what is going on? Like, no one's studying here. Like, everyone's just off their face on a Tuesday at 11 o'clock and they're supposed to have a seminar. It was the best sort of field study, if you will, that there's this common thread across the university, which is that people go to uni really to party and get off their face. They don't go to learn, to study and do anything meaningful, but they're paying for the privilege to do that. It made no sense. So I was fortunate enough, I was earning money and I got to dip in and out of that rather than my friends who were in it. So that was, again, a great example of, no one's happy here. Like, no one likes it. You're doing this because you enjoy it and it's sensual and it's full of pleasure. But ultimately, it comes down, as everyone does, after a heavy Sunday and you've got your lecture on Monday morning or whatever. So I think, I had a bit of a whistle-stop tour as to the lifestyle that pervades in uni across the country. And that definitely, I was caught up in that as much as anyone, but I was a guest because I could leave and come back to London to work. If that makes sense.
Totally. Changing tracks slightly, described yourself as the gas and Aaron as the brakes. So I wanted to know if you could expand on that a bit. And also, I'm really keen to know, like, how do you resolve conflict as founders between you, Aaron, and Sam?
Yeah, I mean, look, we don't really have much conflict. I think we're all quite self-aware people, actually, again, to that trait. And actually, the best thing about all of us is that we're trying to always find the best outcome, not the personally right outcome. Obviously, we have moments where things get a little bit heated, maybe, but not really. Like, it's been 4 years that have been relatively very smooth. Like, yes, there've been slight things here and there, but hardly ever. I mean, I think it's because we're all seeking the objective best outcome rather than, my opinion is best because it's mine. We never have those sort of conversations. So it's a very rare co-founder relationship because egos aren't caught up in it all. Because there's an understanding, I think, that the minute that starts is the minute you kind of collapse and you can't work with each other. So it's been great. I've loved working with them. We'd also, I think we have a bit of a dream relationship with each other. And then Victor as well, who's our fourth, really, came in after, but he's there with us. And we have a great ability to just navigate things and be reasonable, rational, not be too attached to outcomes and just go for the best answer, really.
Love that. And how do you ensure that you don't really get caught up in like the operational weeds of the business, the minutiae, the small things? Yeah. How do you kind of stay true to your vision and your North Star?
Have people who are better than you running the show. So Victor's the MD. He's amazing at kind of especially content operations and bringing teams together, finding great talent. He's amazing at it. So he runs Arcade really in terms of the Sidemen team. He's the MD of that the business, if you were to call it Arcade and Arcade within the Sidemen especially. He runs all of that. And so once it's always find your MD, right? Find your CEO. For me, it's like I don't want to run this stuff day to day. I can, but I don't want to. I'm nowhere near as effective as someone like him. So he's been brilliant and he's done an unbelievable job at rallying people, getting people bought into a bigger mission, just being so phenomenal at kind of creating order and structure within that team. So that's how we don't get caught up in the minutiae of that business. And then we have Robin who runs our brands. We have Jamie who leads on the fund. So we have these people around us and then we obviously oversee it all. But when you've got great people running the show who are empowered and are incentivized and aligned fully, then it's kind of cool. It's like, okay, go. Like, I don't want to get in your way. That's how it should be, I think. Otherwise, why hire somebody if you're there to micromanage them and tell them what to do? Surely you should bring amazing people in and say, go and build. Here's your alignment, here's your goal, your mission, go ahead. And I'm here to help. But use me as a tool for you rather than feel like you have to like report to me in a way that is almost, micromanaging. It's not how we work.
Love that. So obviously there's, between the four of you, there's obviously a great amount of trust and respect for one another and how you operate. I want to know, what's your favourite failure, either at Arcade Media or sort of pre-launching your own business, and what was the kind of main lesson that you took from it?
So I've said this before, and I think I can't remember where, but it really stuck with me. So Mary, who was is the CEO of YMU, was the head of entertainment when I was in the entertainment division. She said to me on my first appraisals, going back to the point on imposter syndrome and whatever else, she said to me that I think it was like you could tell. I came into the room and it was like slightly like she's always so like happy and bubbly. It was something slightly off. I was like, oh, that's a bit weird. Yeah. And she came in and basically said like, look, like I think you're sort of rubbing people up a bit the wrong way, randomly, right, as part of it. And I was like, what? She was like, yeah, I think you're kind of just getting off people's backs a little bit. Like, what's going on? And I think what happened is I'd been quite, on a couple of smaller projects or smaller things, I'd just been quite clear as to, I think, a strategy that I thought would work. But I was just sort of quite bullish on that. And again, I'd come in thinking that I needed to stamp myself as chief creative officer at 20 years old of a company this size. So I need to have a clear opinion and be very strong in that opinion. And I think she said, just bring people with you. Like, don't think you have to do that. Bring people with you. It was the first time I'd ever been corrected, I think, in business for attitude or for approach. And it was the best thing ever because I was so not self-aware. Again, coming back to self-awareness. And it really helped because I was like, well, okay, that felt awful. I was not expecting that. And, you know, you build a character and a sense of, you know, how you want to present yourself is part of your role, right? I think sometimes. And I came in thinking, yeah, well, I need to be this guy and I need to be quite strong. And actually, what she said, bring people with you, stuck with me ever since. The idea that, no, just bring others with you, slow down, go at the pace of others sometimes, like really, you know, lead from behind, don't always lead from the front. Like you don't need to. And I think especially when you're coming in young in a company like that, the first thing you should do is listen, be super collaborative. And now I know, obviously, after years of doing this, how it's a diplomacy game. Like you're there to build bonds and relationships, and that's how you win. It's not about the output. So I think when you come into a big company and you're young, focus on relationships and network and bonding and helping others, like give as much as you can, support others' projects, like be there as a resource for others. In my role, that's going back, what I would have done from the beginning. Don't feel like you need to be the one who's creating the output. And that's the key. Help, be supportive, lead from the back, because then you're empowering others to be great. And that's where you really get value in a big company, I think, more than you being the one to push everything through and do everything yourself. It's the easiest way to create enemies. And thankfully, I didn't really make any enemies there and everyone was very nice. But you could definitely tell there was a moment there which could have gone either way, I think.
Thanks for sharing that, Jordan. Now, my next question, and I get a sense from our interview that you're kind of very calm, you take everything in your stride, you're obviously very self-aware. And you don't let things get on top of you. Yeah. And, you know, the fact that you employ amazing people around you. But building a business can sometimes be kind of all-consuming. So I want to know, is there a sacrifice that you've made either consciously or subconsciously in building your business?
I think, is there a sacrifice? I think at times, definitely, I mean, my wife will attest to this, right? At times, I've definitely not balanced things as well as I could have done, for sure. And I've had to really work at that. And I've documented some of that, like on LinkedIn and so on. But I think, like balance is hard, right? Always. And when it's your own, it's very different. You need to set your own boundaries in a way that you don't when you're an employee. You're not working for somebody else's time. Every minute of every day is potential time that you could be using for your business, which is the quickest way to create misery in your life, destroy your relationship, destroy your family, like have no bond with your kids, etc. If you use every minute of those of that potential time. So I think it's about finding balance, which is also why I think having co-founders is so good, because my two co-founders are amazingly they're just great to have, because you share the load, right? And that's partly why I always say the Sidemen have been successful, is because there are 7 of them, so they balance each other out and they share the load, so it's not heavy on each of them individually. But I think for us, it's a similar thing on a much smaller level, whereby we, just aren't lonely and isolated. It'd be very difficult if you feel like your back's against the wall and it's all on you as a CEO, co-founder, and you're on your own. It's like a completely different mindset that you have to have. And I don't know whether I'd be able to do that, being totally honest, especially now with kids and stuff. So I think, the biggest sacrifice has been around, friction, tension, sometimes challenges with that balance, and then having to overcome that through giving up more work, naturally, which is the inclination to do more, obviously for family, make sure that is as good as it can possibly be, and if not better than it could be, or better than in a job it would be, right, if I was working for someone else. Otherwise, what's the point? I think the best thing about my business and having it is freedom, right? It's freedom for all of us to choose how we live and how we structure our families around our work. So if it's not doing that, then what's the point? Just go work for someone else.
Yeah, 100%. I can relate to that. I think when my second daughter was born and my wife went back to work after maternity leave, I took the decision then to only do 4 days a week. And I've been doing that for nearly 3 years now. And I think you're in control. Like if
Totally.
you're a business owner and you're doing your own thing, then you should spend your time as best you see fit. And I value the relationship of building that bond with my daughter as I did with my son, to spend that quality time with them, because they'll be my son's already at school, my daughter's going to be at school next year. Like that time's going to be gone. Totally.
I mean, I start at 10, end at 3:30, and then basically, with the kids in for the afternoon, evening, and then if I need to do stuff. I mean, that's the thing. I think it's more like you're always on. It's just when you're working rather than switching off. Like you're always somewhat there, because at 11 o'clock you might have an idea or do something or whatever, but it's just having times, again, like you're in the office and you're not. It's that mindset more than it being, you do your 9 to 5 and that's it. You're off, your head switched off. And I think also for a creative person that you need space, right? And you need to have different influences and different inputs. Otherwise, how can you be creative? It's impossible. So yeah, space is key for creativity, I've found as well over the years. So in a way, the more space you give yourself, the better your work becomes, rather than, stuff every minute of every day working, and then you actually don't have the space to be creative and think well.
Yeah, I read something the other day of someone talking about this very fact of actually having some time for solitude. So not actually, even if you're going out for a walk, people will take their headphones or listen to a podcast or music, but actually just having some off time when there's no input coming in. And that's when often you are your most creative.
Totally. And I'm just having influences and just being around other people, like working out, leaving the office. Why? Even with people being at the office, I think it's so important to give people space to go work at a coffee shop or whatever. It's just like get out and be creative, because you're not being around others and breaking your your environment is so important, I think, just to thinking differently and thinking well.
As entrepreneurs, I feel like we're already very familiar with the challenges of corporate culture. I think that's one of the reasons why maybe we are entrepreneurs and we're not working for other people. But as entrepreneurs, we're also leaders in our own business. And so I think it's really important that we do understand the pros and cons of different types of corporate culture and how to get the best out of people. And we can't just take what other people have done before, because that's not working. We have to adapt, or we're going to get left behind. We're not going to get those employees. And again, especially as entrepreneurs, it may be that you don't have the other kind of attractive things that corporate culture might have. But one thing you can do is create environments where people really feel like they can thrive, where they can have their ideas heard, where they can develop and grow their skills. So one of the things that Jordan brought up was that Gen Z are questioning corporate culture because they're kind of asking, is it worth it? They're maybe just having to play games within corporate environments, and they don't necessarily feel like they're showing up, they're being themselves, they're able to be creative. I have to say, this isn't only a Gen Z thing. I'm sure, I mean, I've definitely experienced that as well, and I'm definitely not Gen Z. And so I wonder if it's materialism that's driving that, or rather, and I think it is in some cases, but rather, is it stability and safety that's driving that? Because that is one thing that corporate culture can offer, although it's still not that stable necessarily, and especially in kind of current climates. There is pension, there is, there is job contracts, there is ongoing revenue in these businesses, and lots of people around to help support you. So what do entrepreneurs need to bear in mind as they're bringing new people into the business, and especially, like we said, thinking about maybe the younger generation and unlocking creativity in people? What do we need to do?
That's a big question. I think that entrepreneurs are in a great position because, like you said, some of the things that corporate culture we can't offer, like, that real kind of long-term stability, amazing pensions, all these fringe benefits, all of that stuff. But I think where I see Gen Z focusing is on this real sense of self-worth, that purpose, that whatever you want to call it, self-fulfillment, self-actualization. So I think entrepreneurs can really lean into that. A lot of entrepreneurs are very mission and vision focused. They can really captivate people and bring their employees along with them, along that mission. And they can reward them in terms of potential employee options, that culture of being able to grow and develop. I think in an early stage startup is second to none. Like that personal development you're going to get anywhere else in the world. So I think there's lots that entrepreneurs can do to employ younger people and really bring them into the business. Like Jordan said, like they're very transparent. They can cut through the BS in business speak. And I'm going to put my head on the line here, Becky, and say that this is a great thing for business because we're going to get so many more progressive businesses as a result of younger people demanding different things. Mm-hmm. So I think this is a great opportunity for entrepreneurship, but also for the broader section of the 5.5 million people that are self-employed business people in this country.
Yeah. So I actually do an exercise every year with Gen Zs and young millennials when I'm doing some training, and I asked them this question. It was to do with like, what do Gen Z want in work? And what I find fascinating about it is, number one, some of the things we're talking about here are actually a generalization. What I also see are people who are like, I want those high paid jobs. I want to make my way up through the ranks. I want, like, those things still exist in Gen Z, just in the same way that being mission driven existed in my generation, or, you know, in older generations. It's just that there's a better understanding. And I think what Jordan described in terms of having that access to the internet, social media for your entire life and growing up in that, for all its problems, it really does allow you to find other people that think like you. And I think that that bolsters your own voice and your own understanding of what matters to you, and gives you more knowledge about that as well. Maybe not always real knowledge. There's also the kind of fake news aspect to that. But I think that that's such a benefit for those who are coming into the workplace now versus 20 years ago when maybe I was entering the workplace. You didn't have that exposure and you thought everybody just thought like those other people who were senior in the organizations that you're in. And that can feel like quite a lonely place, and it can feel like a very disempowering place. So so I also wanted to kind of demystify this idea that like all Gen Zs are the same and all like millennials or all Gen Xs are exactly the same. We're definitely not, and there's definitely lots of different things that people want in that space. But I think there's something that we've all always wanted in the workplace, which is to have those intrinsic motivators unlocked, that ability to show up and do your best job and know that you're actually able to express yourself and to develop your skills and work towards goals that are meaningful for you. And like you said, I think we can do that a lot more easily in a startup environment, as long as it's well aligned to the person that you're employing. And therefore, it also does matter that that fit is really good, because in a small startup team, it will really make a difference if you've got people there who are either a great fit or people who aren't a good fit. And either way, that's going to take your business in a certain direction. So thinking about kind of others and what they need and connecting with others, which is what we need to do with our teams and the people that we're working with. Jordan also talked about using emotion to connect to others, and in particular, starting to think about online and how do you create things that other people are going to connect to. The idea that a lot of us are looking for relief, a lot of us are looking for escape. We're looking for other things too. But I think this notion of using emotion to connect with others is really important. It's, of course, not a new thing.
No.
Pathos was something that Aristotle talked about over 2,000 years ago when he was talking about how do you influence other people, how do you bring other people along. Pathos is the most powerful thing. And so that's like, how do you make people feel something? And whatever that thing might be. It's certainly what I teach if I'm ever working with entrepreneurs around any kind of communications. How do we make people feel something? How do we get into the minds of that audience and therefore give them what they need and understand what they need and what they're looking for? So I thought it was, and I've started to ask myself some of those questions as well. We as humans do know how to connect through storytelling. Something that concerns me a little bit with social media is that I feel like we've lost some of the nuance. And we kind of need this increasing amount of provocation. And perhaps that's because we're just so flooded with content. Do you think that we've become kind of more or less empathetic? Does that mean that we feel more, or we need to feel more to actually respond to something? Or are we better now at kind of responding to things and understanding other people because we're exposed to all of this content and other people's thoughts, feelings, the entertainment they give us and everything else? Like, what's going on here?
Again, I feel a bit torn, a bit like a paradox again. It's I think the crux of it is that we're overstimulated in today's world in terms of our devices, like the amount of times that we check them per day, all of the social media that's available at our fingertips. So I think that's the first thing. I think you're absolutely right. Like, these issues and problems have been around for thousands of years. It's nothing new, right? There was a great quote I heard the other day from Naval Ravikant, the entrepreneur and investor, and he said that the older the problem, the older the solution. And I think there's a lot of truth in that. So I think we have to sometimes remember that, we have evolved, obviously, but some of these problems are are long-standing issues, and there's already solutions to some of them. One concept I wanted to touch upon, because I think it's really relevant, I'm going to talk about AI, not artificial intelligence.
Okay.
So artificial intimacy, which is a concept that I've heard of recently. So, we can be more connected now more than ever to people around the globe, regardless of where they're from, what country, what continent, what time zone they're in. But in reality, people don't know their neighbours. Who do they get to feed their cat when they go on holiday? So we can feel more connected, but they're very weak, superficial connections. Whereas, traditionally we build long-standing, deeper connections in our local community. So I think that there is a way of thinking that actually we want to be more connected on a deeper level rather than these thousands of connections that are very surface and superficial.
Yeah. And I did notice, obviously, Jordan is somebody who's very well tapped into kind of how to lever social media, how to lever, just the way media works right now. One of the things I noticed in how he talked is that there were quite a few kind of either generalizations or maybe assumptions made. So even thinking about the differences between generations, for example. And I wondered if that was, maybe that's just his nature in terms of how he talks. But I was thinking about it from the point of view of social media more broadly as well, where because things are created to provoke an emotion, does that mean that everything kind of has to be very tight in its messaging, and everything has to be kind of almost contrived in its messaging, and we have to create these barriers and these boundaries that mean that we aren't actually really connecting with saying what superficially people want to hear and that they're going to respond to on a very quick kind of superficial level. And that, what you've just said about that artificial intimacy, I think is very interesting, because one of the trends I'm hearing about more in social media coming into 2025 is around how do we go back actually to some of the things that were happening maybe 4 or 5 years ago, where it's more storytelling, it's more personal again. It's not just the 5 tips to do this, or watch somebody, I don't know, crash a car or whatever it might be. So it's a little bit less salacious, and maybe people really craving that deeper connection as opposed to the artificial intimacy. But also I wonder if for some people, maybe they've never even experienced that. And if you haven't experienced that, then how do you even know that that's what you're seeking?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think we're going to see the ramifications of kids growing up with technology at their fingertips for some time. It is going to have an impact, a very long-term impact, and it will undoubtedly change people, whether that's for the better or worse. I mean, guess time will tell. But I think you're absolutely right in terms of that storytelling coming back into kind of social media. I think that's definitely true. I think that the magic really happens where you're actually coming up with a framework of, what do I want people to understand? What is the concept? And then tying in a personal story to that, rather than people just telling personal stories and what? What was the purpose of that?
Not just all of us story timing all over the internet, and they're so what? Yeah. Good for you. I think you're right. It's using stories to illustrate points. And actually, just to bring it kind of full circle back to some of the things we were talking about earlier in this episode, which is, I think many of us are going out there and finding the relationships that work for us. When we make those strategic partnerships, actually, we do try and go beyond the superficial. I know that, we've even talked about it here, and I think you and I now, we've been working together long enough to have seen kind of other kind of relationships maybe come and go, working relationships, and going, oh yeah, there's a reason why we like doing this together. And it goes beyond just, we're interested in the same thing, or we can create something that people like. It's because we actually kind of respect and trust. And I know for me personally, I learn from talking to you, and I feel kind of there's an expansion from talking to you, and it goes beyond that superficial. Sorry, I'm just I don't know what I'm doing.
Completely vice versa, Becky. I think it's about, if you develop those relationships, then you don't know where it's going to go. And I think the whole learning and exploration and, you know, the whole sum of everything working better together, that's definitely going to be the outcome. And you just need to find the right people.
Yeah, and perhaps that's a better way to amplify who you are and what you're doing, as opposed to like, well, how can I quickly and easily and artificially try and create something? Well, if I come together with people who think and feel the same way as me and have shared values, but who will still provoke and challenge as well, that we can be thoughtful and we can explore together. That's a powerful way to put your work out there and to amplify what it is that you're already doing. So as we've already discussed, Jordan's got a really strong insight on the realities of the creator economy, but also how to do personal branding and how founders can use content as a strategic tool to grow their business. So I'd really like to hear more about that. So let's go over to part 3 of the interview.
So Jordan, I heard you say the biggest leverage that everyone has is the opportunity to build a personal brand. So can you give us some practical tips for founders to do this?
Yeah, so let me rephrase it. I don't know if it's the biggest leverage. I think it's one of, but obviously skills, having great skills and networking is equally as important. But network through personal branding is a massive accelerator. Personal branding, I think, is just around building out a brand for yourself that is clear online, and then creating content that communicates what you do and what you believe in, your thoughts, your ideas around business, etc. Leveraging things like LinkedIn, Twitter, creating content that's valuable but also relieving is really key. Again, to the point on relief. And that provides an insight or an opinion or a take or a theme that you're actually going to comment on, or something that is, true to you and what you do in your business. Whether you're a founder, it's maybe documenting your business. It's creating pictures and videos and showcasing your journey, going from where you are to where you want to be. If you are working for a charity, it's doing the same, but around your bigger mission. It might be highlighting the cause that you're really trying to advocate or fight for, whatever it might be. But it's about finding your voice and finding the thing that you want to say, that you want to put into the mix, and then going and breaking that down and doing it. And I think starting is really key with personal branding. I don't really like the word personal branding so much because it doesn't denote actual content creation really, but creating a personal brand and then making content around that brand is a great opportunity for anybody. Anyone can do it. It's just about finding a voice and being confident enough to go for it. So yeah, big believer in it, and it provides tons of leverage, because if you can build a little audience around your voice, then you've got more than most, and that's because most don't actually try to do it. And if you can do it, it helps with jobs, it helps with networking, it helps with, freelancing, it helps with everything, from a career perspective, and from even when you're in a company, it helps massively. So I think it's, create the leverage around you by building an audience around yourself is the most amazing opportunity that everyone has access to. It's just around whether or not people want to do it, I think.
And what trends do you predict in regards to the creator economy in the next couple of years?
So I've said a number of times now, and I really believe it. I don't know if there is such a thing as a creator economy. There's the creator economy. I don't really believe in it. I think really it's a brand economy. It's like you're a middleman for brand spend, realistically. So that's where everyone gets their money from, through advertising. So really it's an advertiser economy, or advertising. It's a little trickle down of brand spend. And it's a real trickle down. You're not getting nearly as much as you think you are as a creator. And most creators don't make a lot of money. Most creators can't make money. So is there really an economy? I don't know if it is a very bad one. But I think the trends for the world of creators is exactly what I was saying. It's more and more people realizing that they have access to audience and distribution, and that they can build something around themselves. They can build a community. They can connect with people, whether that becomes commercial directly or indirectly through you advertising your business and your business becoming successful. Either way, there's opportunity there to build an audience, right? In terms of trends, I think you're going to see increasingly creators have to find work within big companies. I think that's something that's going to happen. Massive opportunity for big companies to hire great creators, because a lot of them won't be making a lot of money. They'll be struggling with the independence, with the self-determination that's needed and all those things, because it is hard and draining to be a full-time content creator. I would never do it in a million years, never. Because it's just so intense. It's like you're living video to video to video. That's how you feed yourself, through your videos. It's such a strange model, and it's hard mentally to do that. So I think, more and more creators will be, if they're not making enough to live, they'll be working for brands, becoming mini agencies, mini production companies. The business models will just become, rather than content becoming the business, businesses will just be distributed through content, or will be marketed through content, or through content creators. I think that will have to happen because content won't pay. And YouTube, right? The amount of money you can make on YouTube, if you're big, if you have an audience, is great, but it takes a lot of time, harder than it ever has been, because the algorithm is more prescriptive than it's ever been and requires more and more sort of optimization and strategy than it ever has done. So again, it's difficult. Some people break through that and do random things that pop, but few and far between. So again, is there really a way to make money through content? Not really. So then, okay, you're going to have to support yourself. If you have an audience, maybe brands will pay, but if everybody has an audience, is that audience worth a lot? Not really. So again, it's finding real business models that you can market through social is more interesting, I think, for me. And then working with brands, with businesses directly as actual freelancers, I think is something that will have to come. There's a kind of a few, it's probably more, but I think that's the main thing. It's just increasing saturation, decreasing value per creator. What does that mean? It means more people needing to find work or find revenue streams. So yeah, more businesses and more people in-housing.
Interesting. And sort of keeping on the theme of the future, what does success look like for you in 5 years' time? And how will you know that you've got there?
I think success is, I've never been like one to say, okay, in 5 years' time I want to be here, or if I do this, then I'll be happy, because I've learned very quickly. I learned very quickly in life that the more you try and sculpt the future and predict and try and plan, often the more you're going to be disappointed, then you're going to be, and also you miss the ride because you're focused on, well, I'm not here where I thought I would be. I just think it's not overly healthy. But if I was to say, what does success look like in 5 years' time for me, I would say it's having peace in my life, having peace in my business, building things, creating moments, and everyone being happy. I think that's kind of it, really. Everyone being ordered, which is, the most important thing for me, for my family. And then, of course, if I can have that for people in my business, then great. And if we can be a facilitator of order in people's lives, helping people to have families, helping people to, be independently empowered financially, helping people to start their own businesses, like that for me is really interesting, I think. Because a lot of people are trapped. How do we create a space where people can be liberated? Would be brilliant, I think.
Love that. And Jordan, I'm going to put you on the spot here. If you had to distill down just one piece of advice that you'd pass on to a fellow early stage founder, what would that be?
Well, probably no surprise from this interview, but I think be self-aware. Like really look in the mirror and know who you are, and stop lying to yourself that you're special and that you're a genius, because you're probably not. And there are many people who are smarter than you. So be brutally self-aware with yourself, because the sooner you're self-aware, the further you can actually go as who you are rather than who you're pretending to be.
Love that. And where can people find out a bit more about you personally and Arcade Media?
Yeah, so search my name. It's very long and will stick out, but Jordan Schwarzenberger. If you type in Jordan Sidemen or Jordan Arcade Media, I'll pop up. But yeah, anything on Google, and then obviously LinkedIn. Quite big. Less active on social these days. Just I'm trying to like take a breath and just chill, and again with all the things we've been talking about. But I'm on all socials, and yeah. So Arcade. Then obviously the Sidemen. You can Google the Sidemen. I'm sure they'll come up. Yeah.
Awesome. And you've got a book coming out at some point. Are you able to talk about that?
I haven't got a book coming out, but I've got an idea for one that I would like to maybe write one day. So yeah, very early. I haven't got like a publisher on it or anything, but sort of mulling over what could be right. I won't go into it too much detail, but similar themes to what we're talking about today.
Awesome. And Jordan, there's an opportunity for you to ask our listeners a question. Have you got something lined up?
Oh, do you agree that self-awareness is the number one trait in business? Yes or no?
Love that. So Jordan, if I knew you better, what is one question that I would have had to have asked you, and what is the answer to that question?
Oh, it's a good one. I don't know, maybe how many kids are you going to have? I don't know.
How many kids are you going to have then, Jordan?
And I don't know. So you got 3 already? I'll keep it moving. I'll keep it going. That's the answer. Keep it going. Yeah. But yeah, that's I'm trying to think if there's anything else, but probably nothing really. I'm quite open with these things,
Awesome.
But yeah.
Jordan, thank you so much for your time, man. It's been an absolute pleasure.
No, thank you for having me.
I think if I've got one thing that I've heard loud and proud throughout this whole episode, it's the value of self-awareness. I absolutely agree that self-awareness and then self-development based on that self-awareness is so important for you as an individual in your career and definitely as a leader. Self-awareness is the starting point for everything else that you're probably going to need to develop and grow and create over time. So then that, of course, was Jordan's questions. So head over to our socials and let us know what you think about the role of self-awareness in business, for you as an entrepreneur, for you in your career. Ollie, I was really happy to see you ask that question about personal branding. And Jordan said something which I actually live by, and I put it out there all the time as well, which is about increasing your personal profile, accelerate your networking. And networking is obviously something that many people kind of talk about and ask questions about. And for me, kind of being somebody who, being autistic and struggling sometimes in like socially overstimulating environments, to the role of social media to continue to grow connections, to meet new people, to get my voice out there has been really important. But then Jordan also took these things another step further, which is, and again, I found this incredibly helpful when he was talking about content creation alone is unlikely to be the thing that makes you money. So can we talk a little bit more about how we can lever this content creation and social media, but perhaps having that, the reality that the content alone is not necessarily going to be that thing that is going to make you the money?
Yeah, I think it's a long-term game. Ultimately, building a personal brand online is going to really increase your trust and amplify your message. I think there's a lot of crap out there in terms of like these influencers who will put screenshots of like impressions from like engagement pods and all of this rubbish. It's like the so what. I think if you really want to build a strong personal brand online, you need to do it with integrity, trust. You need to be having a very strong message. And that needs to be reinforced when you meet people in person. Often I find with these influencers that they've got this very like strong online presence, but actually when you meet them in person, the two don't match up. There's a mismatch. So
Yeah.
I think personal branding really works where you're building out some really strong content online that really captivates and hooks people in. And it's authentic to you. Like you should be you, unfiltered. You shouldn't pretend to try and be somebody else that you're not. I think that's what makes personal branding great, when you really lean in to who you are. But first you've got to go on that discovery phase of finding out exactly who you are. So it is a journey.
Yeah.
It can be intimidating. You've got to put yourself out there. You've got to, probably get excited by it in the beginning of like, oh yeah, I'm started doing it. And then like you probably crash and burn. So it's about being consistent. It's about being the true you and doing it with integrity, with someone that you actually trust and respect and look up to. So I think those are the key things of building a personal brand online, with that influence, not influencer, influence, and trust and credibility.
Yeah, absolutely. I've heard it said, I think it is I'll need to check this. Maybe we'll take it out if it's the wrong name. Yeah. So Dolores Harkness has a book, and I actually saw her speak at a conference not so long ago. And she was talking about the issue that social media becomes a hall of mirrors. So it's just reflecting back what you put out. Now, personally, I don't necessarily see that as an issue, as long as you're aware of it. And as long as you're putting out, like you said, something that is actually authentic, that is meaningful, to have that reflected back is actually a positive thing. It's an amplification of what you would like to be and how you want to represent yourself. And I think that in itself is a positive thing. She also discusses kind of context and not losing the context. And I think that can often happen as well online, and you can kind of create these little bubbles. So really important to understand kind of the context that you're working in, the context that your content is relating to, and being open about that. But also kind of being aware of this hall of mirrors thing that is going on. And like you said, that's probably why it's very easy for people to suddenly maybe be a mismatch, because if you're not quite representing something that is actually authentic to you, then the real you is not going to be the version that is showing up online. So it's trying to find like who is that person, and at the same time doing what we talked about earlier, which is also thinking about, well, what does the audience need? And guess what? They do need something that is authentic to you. You don't have to be totally different and change yourself, but you do need to be aware of, like, okay, what parts of myself, what are my strengths that I can bring to the world, to the audience, to those individuals who are listening. And then hopefully that hall of mirrors is reflecting back something that is truly you. And therefore, when you're in person, that's still aligned. It's still the same thing. And people aren't going to feel discombobulated.
Yeah.
And I think particularly from an entrepreneurial standpoint, because the likelihood is that your personal brand or the content creation is going to be supporting another product, another service. And when you're out there in the world selling that service, you still need to be you, and you need to resonate with those people in the same way as the content is resonating with those people. So if you're expecting to be able to lever it to sell your product or to sell your service to get new customers, then if there's a mismatch there, then that's going to be really unhelpful to you.
Yeah, there's got to be that alignment and that authenticity, like we said. There was a great Dolly Parton quote that I heard that actually said, find out who you are and then do it on purpose.
Yeah.
And there's so much power in that.
Yeah. I've been really exploring this month. I'm kind of going through some various transitions at the moment and figuring out kind of my next steps in some areas of my life. And I started to really reflect on that idea of, like, who is my best self? You know, like, who is that person I want to show up as? And sometimes it's not always easy to show up as that person. But actually starting to reflect on that, I started to realize, oh, even on what might be a bad day, I can still have those traits, and they might not kind of shine quite so brightly if you're like really fatigued or, you know, or if something's not great. But if you've still got those traits and you're showing up with those traits, then that's that is consistency. And yeah, I love that quote. I feel like I need to write that down somewhere.
I think it's about, doing it on the days that you don't feel like doing it, right? And just being consistent.
Yeah. So I took a few more practical steps from listening to Jordan. And these are things that I'm going to explore for myself, as well as I think they're really great tips for people who are listening. So document, don't just create. So like share the process of building your business, the lessons learned, the behind the scenes moments. I know in my first business, I was doing quite a lot of this, and it really was helpful in terms of building networks, building tractions, and just keeping you in the mind of other people as well. So just, seeing kind of the real journey, the real you, I think that's very attractive to people, rather than just creating this content. We've already said about kind of aligning the content with who you are, but also aligning the content with your business goals. And so really mapping out, okay, so you've got this content, but what is that helping you to do? What is that levering for you? So thanks for that advice, Jordan, because I did a whole brainstorming thing on that yesterday too. And then the idea of networking through your content as well. And so again, I think it's, we've already discussed that, but this idea of how do you use the content online to just keep you in the minds of others, to get them maybe to know you a little bit more deeply, rather than kind of getting to know a superficial version of you.
Yeah, it's that salience piece, isn't it?
Yeah. So I think I personally have a lot of things to take away from this episode, and I hope everybody else does as well. Looking back, Ollie, what are people saying from our last episode? The question from Gareth from 1860.
We had a great question from Gareth Evans, founder of 1860. He wanted to know, what is the biggest barrier from stopping you launching your own podcast? Is it A, lack of time, B, budget concerns, C, undefined topic or niche, or D, something else? 29% of you said that it was a lack of time holding you back from stopping a podcast, but a massive 57% of you said it was concerns regarding budgets and finances regarding setting up a podcast. 14% of you said it's something else, and nobody voted for undefined niche or topic. This question sparked lots of debate online. James chipped in and said it's really renewed his enthusiasm for doing his own podcast. But, and it's still a big but, I just don't know when or how I'm going to find the time to get started and do it properly. Catherine chipped in and said it's a technical skill set and the time to edit the content, which is really holding her back from starting her own podcast. So, Gareth, thanks for the question. It sparked some lively debate online.
And Ollie, tell us about our next guest.
We have got a very intriguing character in Dave Mason, who is founder of a SaaS business called Splutter and also a media training business called Mentor Media Training. The business was actually started by an MBO rather than that kind of typical founding journey that we normally hear on the podcast. So it's a first here on Founded and Grounded, and he's got an incredible story. So I'm really excited about diving into that episode.
Yeah, I'm excited for everyone to be able to hear it. Thank you, everyone, for listening. If you like what you've heard, please leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. And don't forget, there's a big selection of previous episodes. Just search Founded and Grounded on your favorite podcast player.